Hey, Cody.
Hello.
How are you? Hey, Nora.
Good. I can't hear you. Just a second.
Hello.
How are you, Nora?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good. Hey, Alec. How are you?
All right.
Good.
In Ann Arbor again today.
You are. Are you living there? I forgot.
No, I'm on campus, but I've had doctor's appointments just scheduled for this month, so I'm just I keep going
back and forth.
Yeah.
I was in Ann Arbor 2 weeks ago for the career fair there, and the traffic is unbearable there now.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has made that observation, but I was not happy.
Yeah, it's downtown's grown a lot.
And I wasn't even downtown. I'm just bitching about having to park over at the music building.
Oh, really?
You know, just to go to architecture, right?
Yeah.
For their career fair and schlepping a big bag of like stuff.
Yeah. Kind of avoid the university as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's not so bad that, you know, I get to go by a Saarinen building.
Right.
Nora, how are you tonight? Oh, I said hi to you, Nora. Desmond, how about you? Hung, how are you?
Good.
Super sparkly, Hung. I like that. And Nathaniel, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I want to wait till everyone gets here before we have sort of a general conversation. I'm running late myself. I got a phone call that when I finished it, I wasn't aware of what time it was, so that happens. So now, Hung, the pressure is on for you to come in from the tundra of Farmington Hills.
I'll be there next month.
3 miles from campus.
Okay, what is it? April 5th?
Yes. So so I will be on campus for Dustin's energy modeling lecture, and pardon me, and I will be really irked if I do not shake your hand. I don't even want you to like comb your hair or change the t-shirt, because I've got this kind of like impression of you that I don't want meeting you in person to sort of like shatter that. Okay.
Okay.
Good grief. Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm fine, thank you. And Stefan, how about you?
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
I said not bad. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Yeah, I went to the Red Coat, Desmond, and was in bed by 9 o'clock. So that's what happens when you reach, you know, my age, right? Yeah, it's a good place. I'm so old, actually, that in 1975, when I was finishing up in high school, the drinking and voting age were 18. So we, being the responsible adults that we were in that epoch of time, right? We could actually go to the Red Coat as seniors in high school and drink a beer and eat, you know, a burger or the Mount Vernon ham and cheese sandwich, and then go back to class. Right? Those were the good old days. Okay, I think we have enough here. We don't have everyone. We're missing Jess. I think Jess always has trouble. I'm just going to do a straight up invite. We're missing Caitlin.
Yeah, he's usually on a commuter train for a little bit, trying to get his Wi-Fi.
His data must be crazy. Okay, I sent them all. Thanks, guys. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. First, I want to look at the calendar with you because it is starting to get very accelerated for you. And I just want, and I know we've done this before, but I want you to be aware of everything. This is the 12th week of the 17 weeks in this studio, right? And if we sort of just do a look ahead, we will have tonight, for instance, this group discussion, and then individual sort of team discussions pertinent to last week's Benchmark 2 reviews. Thursday night, we will have a new program or assignment, rather, to go over. And I mean, it's basically an extension, right, of everything you've been doing. But this new assignment will also outline the expectations for the finished work. And it will create kind of a menu. There's a menu of choices for options that you all can sort of select which ones you want, or none at all. And those options will have various points associated with them. So like if you're sitting at like an 89, the application or the selection of an execution of one of those options that might be like 2 points pushes you up to a 91, right? So the options are an incentive to get you to do more work, not just finish the work that you've been working on. And ultimately, the doing or the implementing of more work will help build the package for your portfolio that I'm so keen on having you do this semester. So we will go over that on Thursday, day after tomorrow. Then we will have a flip-flop of next week, because the week of April 3 and 5 in the first week of April, we will have the lecture on Thursday night, and I will be on campus for that lecture. Not sure where we're going to be. We're probably just going to find a room, because we're going to be blended with Dan Farrow's day studio. And the lecturer is Dustin Altschul, who actually did his undergraduate work at Cincinnati. He's a Bearcat like me, and did his graduate work at Lawrence Tech, and is now on faculty here with us. And while he will not be driving in for this talk, I don't believe, he will do an encore of the energy modeling lecture that he gave my studio last semester, and it's actually really good. And the reason I'm doing all of this is because an energy modeling through Revit is one of the extra credit points, right? So by like, if you think that that's something that you're wanting to do, this would be a good lecture to be at, and certainly would be one you won't want to miss anyways, because he really does unpack a lot of tools for you to help you understand your building vis-a-vis energy consumption and orientation and the like. So that will happen on Thursday the 5th. So we will only have probably 2 or 3 conversations that night, and we'll have 4 on Monday the 3rd. All right. Then I will have another lecture on the 10th. It will be the last lecture for the year. And it will be some images and some thoughts on the work of Hamilton Anderson in terms of the things that we're doing right now. I think one of the benefits maybe of having, you know, a practitioner teach a studio is that you can evaluate not only their sort of academic credential or their teaching capacity, but you can also sort of discover a little bit more about what they do during the day and why that matters to them. And I think that's an opportunity that I want to give you. So I will lecture about the work of Hamilton Anderson and what I'm doing there on Tuesday the 10th. We'll have desk crits that night, and we'll have our last, I'm sorry, no, I'm looking too far ahead. Yeah, our last sort of desk crits on the 12th. Then the week of the 17th and the 19th, we don't have studio, right? We do not have studio. That is Hell Week, right? And so I do not conduct classes. I do not send out an invite. I do not, create a Google Hangout. However, if you want to meet with me, I'd like you to let me know on Sunday the 15th that you kind of want to talk on Tuesday night or Thursday night, the 19th, right? So I'm available that week if you need me by appointment, but let me know on Sunday so that I can accommodate your request. Sunday the 22nd is pencils down, right? Midnight, pencils down. Sunday the 22nd. And we will have our final reviews, which we call Benchmark 3, on the 24th and the 26th. And at those reviews, you will see some familiar faces and maybe one or two new ones. So we will have guest critics both nights. And that will be really the end of the presentation and jury week. And then we will have our last class session, which will be kind of a carbon copy of tonight's session on Tuesday, May 1. And then you're done. Right? Are you all crystal clear about that landscape? It's literally a month from now that you're basically over the hill, like I was on Monday, and you will be moving on to sort of other sort of classes and seminars and studios. Some of you will be moving into critical practice, and I'm going to be very keen on that journey for you. And so for people like Nora and others who might be in our graduate program that I haven't met yet, this is an opportunity for us to meet when that comes to pass, because you will be up here about 4 times during that 10-week session. And I will look to rendezvousing with you on campus over a cup of coffee. So let's plan on that for one thing. And then I'll probably see some of you in the future, right? So that's where we are. It's the end of March. We've only got really till the end of April to be together with our last class on May 1st. Crystal clear? Cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Benchmark 2 and your general impressions of yourselves and of the work, and maybe the critics, really anything, the pace, the drawings, the presentation. Let's open it up.
I could say something quick about Betsy, if that's all right. I thought she had some really great feedback, and I thought it was really refreshing to have somebody who had more of like a landscape architecture bias, because that was something that we hadn't really quite addressed yet, and that she very mildly brought to our attention as something that needs a little bit more development.
Yeah.
But I liked how she delivered the criticism in a way that we have an opportunity to build on this, not that it was necessarily something that was doomed from, us not having as much attention yet in that area.
Yeah, I think the world of her, which is why, I was motivated to bring her into the office, and she has been a tremendous value to our office and to sort of bringing along all of our younger generation, particularly all of the women in our office who are young design professionals. She is a very, very busy mentor at Hamilton Anderson, and perhaps seeing her sort of in action last Tuesday night gave you a sense of why that's a true statement. And I will say that she was kind of, and I've known her a long time, since really the mid 1990s. I think 94 or 95 is when I met Betsy. When we started doing reviews together in her own studio and in her husband Peter's studio. I could tell that she was a little bit overwhelmed by how little time you had to present, how much you had to talk about, and really maybe I think the surprise was how similar what you all were doing was to what comprised her own schematic design package for the team of 3 or 4 that she led at Hamilton Anderson. That kind of unnerved her, that in a very short time period, you guys are sort of doing all of the things that we were, responsible to do for our own office. So, but I think she enjoyed it. We talked a little bit about her experiences the next day when sort of the dust settled. So I'm glad you valued her role, and I will definitely be trying to bring her back on Tuesday or Thursday next month. Who else? I saw some love coming from Dasman on that. You want to elaborate on that, please? Oh. Well, I'm hearing something. No, I thought I heard something. No, you're going to have to get that fixed, because we're going to have to talk tonight. Who else? Gotcha. While you're setting that up, I need to hear from you guys.
I would like to say that, I mean, although Trevor and I didn't get to have Jason as a critic, I thought just listening to what he had to say, particularly from his HVAC perspective, was good to hear. And my girlfriend's in his class right now, and she said great things about him, and hopefully I can talk to him some more as well.
Well, so this is a very interesting point. I'm glad to hear some support for Jason and his role in the sort of critical process. So that's good. That was a good instinct that we had bringing him in for this review, and he, in his email back to me, is available to come in for one of the 2 sessions in April. So I will try to schedule that with him. For one thing. For another, I think it's important that you sort of take advantage of the faculty that are on campus, right? For their critical eye and their critical advisement in the next weeks to come. Because of the nature of this last month as it relates to the tectonics of the project. I mean, we were sort of moving from design to the realization of the design as it relates to the implementation of the structural system, the building enclosure, sustainability, as well as HVAC, for example, not to mention, life safety and accessibility. But those kinds of things are things that that certain, critical faculty members, key faculty members on campus can provide you expertise on. So I encourage you to visit with those faculty, the ones that are your friends or the ones that you have a rapport with, and bend their ear, get a desk crit from them. In other words, this happens at every university. This happens to be good skill development for you, because then you're unpacking your project to someone who doesn't know anything about it, and they can talk at least about that package as well as answer your questions. So punchline there, Alec and everyone else, is to rely on the the kinship and the friendship that you have with our full-time faculty who are available to answer questions or just to listen to your presentation as you move into the weeks to come. But bear this in mind. You all need to have appointments with Dan Farrow. You all need to visit with Professor Farrow this coming month. You need to sit down with him and let him take apart the building from a tectonic and technical perspective and have him put it back together again. You need to do that at least once, whether it's on campus or whether it's online. I think he's amenable to doing either. And if someone wants to set up a sign-up list to help him sort of facilitate this when he gets like a 6-hour block of time or a 4-hour block of time, whatever, I think that would be advisable. But this is what I did last year with Professor Rageb, and that's what I'm suggesting that you do for Professor Farrow this year, is to utilize him in the month of April so that you tighten up your design so that what he's getting from you is consistent with what he's expecting. All right. So that's the other thing. So I'm glad that you had something to say about Jason. Who else? Thanks for that, Alec.
If I could also say something about what Jason had to offer beforehand as well. We had discussed a couple of the finer details about how rammed earth works, and like he brought up during the review, a discussion about radon within the soil itself was also a good insight. That wasn't even on our radar as to what we had gotten so far. Excuse me. But he was very good during the review, and I appreciated all the comments he had during the review. As far as the interview or the review process goes, it's still really short. And I don't know, I was going to ask you, what kind of time can we expect for the final review as well?
Same. I'll bump it to 10 minutes. Yeah, I'll bump it to 10 minutes for the final. But basically, almost all of you were woefully long, right? Just to put things in perspective. And Cody, you may appreciate this better than anyone because you have friends at UDM. But at UDM in the thesis studio, which is a 1-year-long body of work, where when they present, and I'll be at those reviews in April, when they present, each student gets 9 minutes to present. 1 year's worth of work. To someone like me who's maybe not seen any of the work up to this point, right?
Yeah.
And we get about 19 minutes, 18 minutes with about 5 or 6 jurors, right? And so not only do I need to be succinct and to the point as a critic in that fighting for time, but so does the presenter, so does the student. So this is not without precedent. And furthermore, even in my own thesis studios here at Lawrence Tech, as well as the advanced design studios, the time limit is about the same. And one of the other reasons why I think this is important is it really does cause you to funnel down and reduce to what I hope is a presentation with concision as the most important sort of virtue that you can muster, is because this is what happens, for instance, when you have to present a variance application to the Zoning Board of Appeals. This is what happens, for instance, when you need to go before the Historic District Commission in your community or the Planning Commission in your community. So the idea that you will have very little time to explain very complex themes with words and drawings to a group that doesn't know nothing about what you're talking about, except that they are likely somewhat predisposed to your topic, is really good training. It's really good training for you right now, and it's going to be essential training for you when you come into the graduate program, because the stakes are really high there, because that body of work generally is over the year, and the stakes are enormous when your client is there, and the success of your verbal and visual presentation may be the difference between a successful project or a project that is denied, right? A variance or approval, which can get to be very uncomfortable for you, right? Because money is at stake, and the calendar and the timeline is at stake. So I am giving 10 minutes to you guys, which is more than I've ever given any group before. The presentations will be on a timer, but the reason I'm doing that is because we're distributed out over the 2 nights, because the dean prefers to run the reviews during review week on the nights that we have our studio. Up to this year, we always had them on Saturday morning, right? So that some of you could fly in or drive in and be here on Friday night, and then come into the campus on Saturday morning and then present there. But we won't really be able to do that this year, I don't think. You're welcome to do that, but it's not encouraged, actually. Good question, though.
Yeah, the reviews at UDM, I stuck around last year to kind of witness the presentations there, and it really did look like a difficult time to present such a large body of work in such a short period of time. But one of the strategies I seen that they used was that some of the students used was just large posters, and they were well organized posters, and the information on there, if you were to look for any kind of detail information,
it's there
about the work, such as like a wall detail, that stuff isn't present there. So when it comes to the presentation on at the end of this month, I guess we're gonna have to keep asking for a little bit more direction as to what kind of level of detail we should, or like at least keeping a discussion open as to how much detail we should include, so we don't fill most of the time talking about a wall section like I ended up doing last week.
Yeah. Well, part of the assignment that I give you will also have some of that information in it as well. But but I don't, let me be really clear. I don't spoon feed you, right? I'm needing you guys, particularly since you're in a group right now, and many of you have familiarity with the preparation of documents, not only from earlier studios, but because you're working in offices. So you have a skill set that is, fairly advanced compared to our friends at UDM, who are usually taking classes during the day and not working, for all intents and purposes at all. But I'm happy to go over that in the next few weeks, and that's really going to be my role in the month of April.
I have kind of seen, I would like to say that I have seen almost a level of, like a high level of reduction in the amount of information that's being brought through in presentations. And I wonder if that's part of a short attention span that is, I guess, part of my generation. Being able to show information as quickly as possible, because people aren't going to pay, they're going to lose their attention after 15 minutes.
So, I mean,
would you say that might be true?
I don't want to go, and I don't really want to go venturing into those weeds, because I'll start using the M word, and I really do resist using that word. I don't fancy the idea of lumping you all together into a group that looks and smells like, one thing, right? I don't want to do that. But I will say this in a different way. One of the things that is intriguing about the UDM presentations is they are analog for the most part. They are posters or drawings mounted on the board or on the wall, and they're all composed, right? Those presentations on the wall are scripted. They're all organized. Someone has done a mock-up of the boards, the walls, the spaces, or the moving partitions. That all of that is designed within an inch of its life. Even the labels, for example. But more important, all of the students carry with them kind of a card or a set of cards that they have their notes on, and that they follow a script. None of you are doing that right now, and I've mentioned that to you several times. I think that if you prepare a script for what you need to say, bearing in mind that concision is important, you won't default to talking about everything on every plate. You won't resort to telling us what we're seeing. So you have the ability to control the experience of these reviews, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to go about that in the days to come, but I think it's incumbent on you to design and script that narration. Also, here's the other thing. There is stuff that we're hearing from you for the first time after your 10 minutes are up, right? After the alarm goes off and we get into a conversation between the other critics and ourselves, you're still there, right? You all didn't walk out. You're there to continue to clarify the information on the wall, or flip back in the slide deck so that we can go to a wall section, for example, Cody, and zoom in on that, right? So that we can see, where the vapor barrier is, for example, or what the insulation spec is, for example. Or we can zoom out and go back to the diagram that might have been at the very beginning of the slide deck. So during that 18 or 19 minutes after your timed narration is also a time where you can still lead the conversation, right? You're still teaching us during that session. You're not there with your hands tied to the wall, right, to get shot. That's not the format that I've ever unpacked for you, and it's not the experience that I'm trying to create for you. I want you to recognize that this kind of dialogue, this kind of exchange is actually how it operates in an office and before planning boards and planning commissions and such. So I'm trying to acclimate you all to this, but you all have to work harder, a lot harder, at organizing your verbal presentation and not resorting to just talking about what's on the drawings. Here's the floor plan. Here's the exercise room, right? Here's the wall section. I mean, we know all of that. So you just used like 18 seconds to tell us what we already know. Tell us why these drawings are important. Tell us what's the most important thing you've learned about these drawings or the process of preparing these drawings, for example. So this is something that you all need to work a lot harder on. What I would commend you on, though, is that many of you were more organized in your presentations, and many of you had a really nice rapport sharing the microphone, so to speak, in a way that kept the presentation and the distribution of content moving in a timely and somewhat, newsworthy way. It was actually much better last week than where you were at Benchmark 1. So I want to commend you for that. Any other final thoughts? Go ahead.
I wasn't trying to critique the process. I was more or less trying to make reason for continuing that process. So.
Yeah, that's it. Point taken. Okay. Anyone else? Casey, Andrew, Roger, Desmond with the microphone, Jess, Hung. Nathaniel, Richard? Okay. Cool. Well, I enjoyed it, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next few weeks. You should all be feeling a little bit more pressure, and you're going to feel even more pain when I make this one final remark before we go into the individual sessions, and that is this: that during Hell Week, for those of us that are working, for those of you that are working, you and your partner should considering taking that week off from work. You and your partner should consider taking time off from work, and honestly, time away from your family. Sorry, to focus on this project. I say this every semester, and I will tell you this: that the students that do commit to the work and do ask for some leeway from their offices are always going to be the students that succeed and do the best. I know this is a big challenge for all of you, because you're all, I assume, entry-level, sort of people, and you're all committed at the offices. But I would definitely talk it over with your partner and broach your employer and ask if there's any way you can have any of that time off, so that you can do the work that needs to be done. So that's something I want to put out there, and basically urge you to put everything on the field, right, as you move towards this final deadline. Because once again, I'm sure your undergraduate projects, right, in IDS 1 and IDS 2 and 3 and 4 were lovely. I'm sure you had lovely experiences working with Professor Orlowski or Professor Wong. But ladies and gentlemen, those are not the projects that, Trevor will tell you this, right? Cody will tell you this. Those are not the projects I'm going to look at. I don't have time to look at those projects. I need to look at your latest work. I need to look at your most mature work, the work that requires the most synthetic skills, and that's what this Comp Design Studio gives you. And honestly, that's why this is such an important studio in terms of doing the best work that you possibly can. So that's what I'd say about all that. Let's let the last group go first, which I think is Richard and Cody. So we'll go through the conversations backwards to forward. So for those of you who are later in the evening, please sort of don't go too far away. Maybe keep your volume down and kind of look at the clock. Maybe set the timer for when you think you're going to be up. I know that I do have a sort of a roster for tonight, so maybe keep that handy as well, so that we can try to stay on schedule for that. I'm going to open that up right now anyway. So yep, here we go. So we're running behind already. So but we'll try to go quickly. All right, so I'll see you all later. And then Cody and Richard, if you guys could be available, we'll start right in on that. Okay. Okay. I want to I don't think that Jason maybe gave you much feedback in terms of like I think he gave like a letter grade, and I think he may have written some comments down. So I don't know. I don't know that I can answer any questions if you had any. So I certainly encourage you all to talk with him further, because I think if pressed, he'd share more insight. But I'm happy to go over any questions or comments then about what I shared with both of you. So why don't we start there?
I think Jason's comment. Oh, go ahead.
Nope. I was asking if you were. Go ahead.
Jason's comments were pretty much the same stuff that he talked to us about.
Mm-hmm.
Just putting it down in writing, basically.
So there's not too many questions about that. So yeah. And then I know Cody wanted to ask this, but me too. You said something about making like a basswood model of the building.
Yeah, so like a laser cut model or a 3D printed model. I think you all should, because the building has such a sort of a more, I guess one way to put it would be a more complicated formal strategy versus a more traditional straight up mixed use strategy, you know, an L-shaped extrusion with balconies, right? I mean, so I don't think I would recommend a model, you know, of a building like that as much as I would for a building that tries to, I don't know that challenge the formal sort of language of this typology is the right word, but there's so much about the formal language in this building vis-a-vis the rammed earth walls, vis-a-vis the way that the core hallways are penetrated by those sort of void spaces, the silhouette of the building in terms of the parapet, all of these things kind of add up to what could really be a very special three-dimensional representation. I think a basswood model would be really, really lovely. I think, you know, a cardstock model would be lovely as well. So it doesn't have to be a material that I'm saying. It could be any material. But it's just something that, you know, a model like that on a base and then photographed, right, could actually be, I think, a very sort of, you know, whipped cream on top kind of thing. And I think it would be a nice way to sort of finish off, I think, a really solid body of work for you guys. So that's something to think about. I don't know what the scale of that thing should be. Maybe 1/16, maybe, you know, 3/32. So I don't know how big I'm talking about, but that's just something I want you to start thinking about. And I actually may include a model like that as a as one of those options on the list for Thursday.
Okay.
Yep. The comments about the elevations, we totally agree.
Yeah, I felt like that was maybe just an oversight on your part this time, because when I brought it up, you kind of went, I could just see the, oh crap, what? They're not in the slide deck kind of thing. And
yeah.
But on the other hand, you know, the elevation as a like backdrop for the explanation, right, of the HVA system was really good. A section would also have worked for that, but yeah, I felt like, you know, in order to understand this building in its place, I think all of you need to show the elevations, and since your building really is elevationally, you know, more interesting than maybe even the one we're doing there on that site, I think this slide deck needed that.
I agree. Okay.
And then the plans, I think that was the only thing I was really crabby about, is that vertical line work. That was maybe a Revit hatch default or something like that. So I think you need to go back and scrub that. I don't necessarily mind a hatch for maybe like the common areas, but to let that run through all of the plan, it was sort of distracting. I think I said that actually.
Yep. Okay.
I also think you know, the perspectives are really nifty, but you guys didn't really kind of talk about the that transactional garden space to the west with that homeowner, and I think that deserves a drawing or more explanation on the site plan. So certainly think about that. And also when you think about the way that you sort of add annotations to the drawings, remember that we're looking at them on these, computer screens. So the scale of things like real simple things like column bubbles and dimensions need to be simplified and enlarged for one thing, but maybe even notations that are off to the side that indicate that garden, for example, on the site plan. Maybe it's just a simple like 8-word notation that talks about what that is and why the boundary of the site plan has been sort of not violated but challenged, right? And what the benefit of that decision is to them and to your homeowners, to your development. So thinking graphically about notations on all of the drawings so that they're very legible, so that you don't have to say everything that you want to say in the 10 minutes that you're going to be given. Because we can go back to those drawings and you can zoom in right on the PDF to show someone who's got a question. So when they start saying, what the heck's going on with the land? Isn't the property line for the west edge here? What are you guys doing over there? And then you can zoom in on that, right? And the notes kind of like answering the question before they even like get into it, before you even have to get into the answer.
Right.
So thinking about that more carefully, I think would be good. Did you guys have a roof plan too?
Yeah.
We didn't include one in this
earlier, but I don't remember it this time. Did I just overlook it myself?
No, we didn't have a roof plan in this set.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of another expectation. Again, you don't have to like spend 20 seconds or 45 seconds on each plate, because you start doing 45 plates, you're toast, right? You're in terms of the 10 minutes, you're toast. So you can, in a way, not talk about some plates, right? But that they're there is helpful because then we can go back to them if we all have a question. I also think that what you guys did by showing the whole building from kind of a 3D perspective from the outset is a really useful way to get a lot of people very quickly on board with, the language of the building, the heft and detail of the building, the formal sort of logic and clarity of the building, what this thing looks like as a thing in their memory. And then when you start to unpack the thing in detail, all of the plates help build it up so that when you end with the video or you end with those renderings, right, it's a way of kind of drawing the presentation and all of its content in full circle. So I sort of always enjoy that. It's like on TV, like on a TV show, they always start with the murder. Like the dude gets murdered by the girlfriend, right? And then everyone spends the next 55 minutes, figuring out, did the girlfriend really do it? And if she did, how did she do it? Why did she do it? Who else did she kill? And then they catch her, at 5 minutes to 9, right? So you can move on to the Roseanne show, right? So that comes full circle. So that narrative is, I think, effective for something like this.
Okay.
Anything else?
Not that I have.
Did you take a close look? I know you did. You probably did. I'm not saying you didn't. At our HVAC outline for the vertical stack water source heat pump.
Yeah, I did. And I think Dan had some. I think Dan had some comments to you about that in like the email thread afterwards, because he actually watched your sessions later that night. So I would be happy to defer to what he said on that, but I did look at that for sure.
That was probably my least confident portion of that presentation.
Right.
We'll discuss that more in depth with Professor Farrell then a little bit later.
Great. And I think the last thing was in my remarks that you know, those units are actually pretty nifty, and I think they deserve some sort of rendering time, right? I think you need to show us. You need to sell one of those units, right? And so that's maybe a new drawing or new drawings that you haven't done that we need to have you do.
That sounds good.
Okay, and maybe one of those Apple Core elements that comes through one of the typical res floor. What does that space look like? You know, maybe it's actually maybe you take one of the units that looks at one of those core penetrations and looks through it and then looks out to the city, maybe Ford Field beyond. Do you know what I mean? So maybe one of those unit renderings is through that element. So you get two, you get two bangs for the buck, so to speak. So that might be worth thinking about. Maybe difficult to do that, but in any event, I think those deserve some illustration as well.
Okay.
All right, I'll move on if you have nothing else.
That's it.
Okay,
Good.
cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Jess, Nathan, are you here? Good.
I'm here.
Good. Okay, I'm looking at you, Jess. What do you got behind you there? Is that railroad stuff?
No, that's my office deck.
Got a hell of a view.
Yeah. What is that vertical stanchion there? Is that an electrical panel?
Yeah, they're electrical stuff. It's for me to plug. Yeah.
Yeah, looks like a Stephen Hole building back there. And
No, it's not. I mean, I have a better view on the other side, but this side is the other side.
No kidding. Okay, good. So excellent. So let's start with Jason. I think he gave you a letter grade as well as maybe one or two sentences. Again, I don't think I can answer any questions that he might have or that you might have for him. But I would, if you're interested to talk to him, his email is on the LTU website, so you can just go to the faculty profile and then get his address and correspond with him. I think he would welcome that, and he would be a valuable resource. And his office is right next to Professor Farrow, so if you don't go that route, you can go right to Professor Farrow, and he can go from there.
Sure.
And then I can talk a little bit about my comments if you want to go into any questions or concerns about the things I shared with you.
I personally didn't have any. I'm reviewing your comments again, but if you want to talk about some things that you want to highlight, but I don't have any questions in particular right now.
Nathaniel?
Yeah, I think we've kind of started piecemealing. The second benchmark was more of additional information that we hadn't talked about the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So with taking the comments from benchmark 1, merging them with benchmark 2, it'll kind of show a complete presentation by the end. You had mentioned a lot about trying to get some 3D perspectives of the room, trying to understand how the space functions, more than just examples of. And that's something that I'm going to start to develop, especially with the HVAC plan, the plumbing plan, and the ADA compliancy.
I would say that those things are still valid. I think those things are really good points still. I love how you're looking at this semester and these benchmarks and the comments that you're getting from them, Nathan, as kind of a cumulative or aggregative thing. Like you're continuing to like look back at one and the things that we talked about there, and then building them into two and kind of connecting dots, and then letting that kind of nudge you or lead you forward. I think that's a really that's pretty cool that you did that. I'm glad. That means that the feedback that you're getting is valuable to you and that you're using it. So that's one thing. If I could talk a little bit about the building by talking about the drawings, there's something kind of quirky about your building. There are things that I really love about it. Like I love the John R. facade. and I love the waiter's fingers that are holding up that mass at the southeast corner. You know what I mean? The structural fingers, and they hold that mass. That moment is actually quite intriguing, compositionally, urbanistically, experientially. I imagine, you know, I can understand. I imagine how that might be. So I really appreciate that, and that sort of undulating wafer potato chip facade is really kind of cool. But I think what I was trying to sort of clarify in my comments that I don't think I was very good at was that the geode, like a coconut, is kind of one whole ugly, messy thing, right? It is for all of its facades, all of its surfaces, the same thing. A geode, technically, not so much because it's faceted, but like a coconut is a brown, hairy, hard thing, right? And you'd never know, except but by shaking it, how special it is as a beverage, right? And as something to eat, until you cut it open, until you slice it open and see the two halves that it produces. So the geode, which Alto does talk about, which Charles Moore, coming later from in time, talks a lot about. So I love the geode idea. Now, I am not saying that your crinkly facade needs to wrap around on all of the facades or on all of the surfaces, but the idea that like half of a coconut or half of an apple, like where you can see the red skin of an apple and then the yellow pulp of the fruit inside of it. That notion is maybe more evocative of the geode for me. So showing that crinkly skin and then showing a different condition on Alfred and on the alley may be the way that you organize the facade. I don't know exactly how I would go about it, but I think you need to test this further, because you kind of didn't put the folded facade on Alfred and you wrapped the corner along the residential property and you reintroduced it there, but then not in the courtyard, for one thing. For another, the courtyard is this quirky marriage of the L-shaped building and then the freestanding sort of playscape, the language of which is somewhat unique to everything else around it. So you guys may need to not revisit this, but I would suggest that you kind of interrogate your thinking and be really clear about how you want it to be understood or seen in the 3 dimensions of your building, and then be rigorous about its application. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think also seeing some of Professor Daniel's comments and like references that he gave me, I'm kind of like brainstorming already, like the next step for that solution.
So again, I don't know if the folded facade, you know, if up John R, if it actually turns the corner, or if there's a gap and you see just that folded facade. This is a plan that I'm giving you here.
Okay.
You see that folded facade ending at the hard corner, and then something else happens on Alfred, and then the folded facade happens back here, and the same reveal occurs, so that you know you need to explore the ways that it can be approached, and then the way that you want to handle it. There's a project, for instance, that I know we've talked a little bit about LOHA this semester, maybe a lot more than you guys were gunning for, but if I go to the project really quickly, why isn't it coming up? Here it is. If you go to his website and go to SL11024, LOHA Architects, or LOHARCHIC, architects, Low Architects, and go to their projects page or works page and go to SL124.
Their website is really good.
Okay, I'll just screen share it real quick.
11024.
Yeah. So I'm screen sharing it right now. So this building is trying to do that same kind of thing.
I see.
Trying to show you a skin and then like the red apple skin, which is the white component here, and it's trying to show you the fruit of the apple inside of it. So this is another sort of strategy that maybe your own project needs to kind of deploy for what that's worth.
I think the final renderings will help define that too.
I just doubt it.
You'll start to see in elevations how the material starts to adjust as we get to the courtyard views, and with a lot more color and character, I think that'll start to pop.
Right.
I did like Professor Faro's comments about just trying to define the outside as more of a rough and dark space, while the inside is more smooth, which is kind of the design intent that we're going. There's a narrative we can try and elaborate on, or that we can write about kind of the history of the site applying to the surface. I've been trying to come up with a little bit more of a narrative for the design intent versus just kind of an introduction to the building. And as I'm writing that, it's kind of coming across as the building tells a story of Rush Park. It gets a little ethereal, but...
Let me also mention one other thing that's historical about Rush Park that is occurring to me about your project that's interesting. One is that these old mansions all had carriage houses in the back, right? So those carriage houses were where the husband and wife who took care of the family, took care of the property, took care of the horses and groomed them and stabled them, right, in the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, before there were cars abundant everywhere in Detroit. So the idea of a building out front and another building in the back, which is the gist of your idea, and that the building in the back is a servant to the building in the front. That idea is kind of being played out in your building, right? In your development, and it might be interesting for you to find a way to describe how you've extended that attitude here, for what that's worth.
Sure.
You guys are supposed to just
Any other comments or questions about Professor Farrow's comments or mine?
Yeah, is Professor Faro coming on later on tonight?
Yeah, he'll be in around 8:30 tonight.
Okay, we were wondering about, so both Jess and I are grad students, so we have the additional 5th assignment for the module 3.
Yeah.
We just didn't know if we're doing one total for the project or 2 separate ones.
Yeah, he'll want to answer that. That's for his lab portion, correct?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. And for you guys, the grad students, I'm probably going to just require you to do, the energy modeling and maybe something else. So that's how I'll differentiate that for you guys.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else that we need to go over?
I don't think so.
So I want to say this too, by the way, and I think I said this in writing, the second benchmark. Maybe we could characterize this marriage as one that started abruptly and a little choppy, and I thought you brought the roadmap. No, I thought you brought the roadmap. You know, that kind of thing. And it's ended up producing, I think, you know, a pretty extraordinary effort, given the distance between you two and the fact that you probably had never even met before, and you guys have just kind of divided and conquered the tasks at hand. And this is actually a really good model for the way that, you know, partnerships in offices work. When, you know, we're working with a firm from Los Angeles, and we have to take the lead at certain moments, so we have to be, you know, assertive, and then we have to recede when the other firm needs to be assertive. So you guys are kind of learning that and behaving exactly the way we'd like to see it happen, particularly in this online thing. So I want to give you guys some, you know, credit for making the most of a very sort of unusual educational experience here.
Yeah,
okay?
I agree. I really agree.
Cool.
Thanks.
All righty. So it's not lost on me. So Jess, so I know, Nathan, you've already been here for critical practice.
Yeah.
So I won't see you unless you come back up to walk.
Are you the featured designer for this semester?
No, it's always some young, up and coming, you know, hot pencil.
Sure.
For instance, the very first year, second year, I think it was Louis Sermaki Lewis, who are now like a big freaking deal, right, in New York, and now, but when we got them, they were nobody, right?
Sure.
And I think Work AC, I think also out of New York, they came through, nobody knew who they were, and now they're a big deal. I don't think we make them big deals, but we get them when they're cheap. So, but they will have visiting professors that are usually local, that work directly with you guys. And one of my colleagues, one of my architects who works with Betsy, for example, I'm encouraging him to apply for one of those positions, and you'll have a chance to meet him. But Jess, you will be taking critical practice then this summer, correct?
I'm not sure. I really don't know yet.
Dude, you know, it's almost April. I think they're going to be releasing the classes.
I know. I just need a break.
I'll say this now. Get it over with as fast as possible. It's a slog. So.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So we'll if you come to if you do take this class, Jess, I'll rendezvous with you at one point in one of those you know, bi-monthly visits. Okay.
Of course. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we'll talk later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Stefan and John. I don't see John. There's John. Yeah. John, you feeling better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Sounds good. I'm glad to hear that. And so, and you guys are the last group that I think had some comments from Jason, and I don't know that, again, there's much he said or that we can say about it, but I definitely encourage you guys to talk to him if that's something you feel would be helpful. You guys are on campus all the time anyway, so it shouldn't be, you know, a hardship. So we can go right into any sort of questions or observations that you have about my comments to you.
Yeah, there was one comment about I think basically the gist of it was we're very like sort of scientific and technical right now, and we have to try and be a little more to the context of the historical area.
Yeah, I guess I would like you to, I think so. Yeah. Again, let me pause you on that point. This class is so concentric to that sort of essence, right? This class is about all of that stuff, the technical stuff. It's really all about the sort of demonstration and manifestation of all of that content. And you guys are, you know, enthusiastic about it. You guys are interested in that stuff. And I think that it's showing, right? It shows that you have an energy and a spirit and a curiosity about it, and that's why the project is very successful at so many levels. I am simply saying, maybe as a way of advising you, that you can be just as scientific or rigorous or disciplined, methodical, even iterative about design and form making and testing of materials, their shape, their patterns, their proportions, right, their massing, and on and on and on and on, as you can be about, exploring the different kinds of insulation in a wall cavity, for example. So I want you to just keep in the back of your mind that there can be enjoyment, pursuing architecture there as well. And for me, the most important firms are the ones that do that. Like, for me, some of the best firms out there are firms that are really trying to do work at this very high level, that blend high design with high science, right? So when I think of, like, in your neck of the woods, when I think of Saussure and Perrot, for example, right? Or when I think of Diamond and Schmidt or KPMB, these are like KPMB all day long, are firms that are doing really, really beautiful work, but they're also backing it up with this really thoughtful science. Mm-hmm. So I want for you guys to like take stock of that kind of work and take stock that that is work that is maybe worth emulating. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the work is clumsy or dumb or awkward or ill-proportioned or ugly or any of that stuff. The work is actually really, really good. But the sort of, if I could characterize it this way just for effect, the relentless pursuit that you're bringing to the science of the class can also become the way that you approach, design interrogation. And ultimately, right, when you get to be really, really mature students and architects after you graduate, you're going to find that you're going to have more satisfaction producing work that is kind of firing on both of those cylinders, for example.
So how do you apply that same sort of like scientific quantitative analysis to like form iteration?
Yeah, so that's maybe not the right pair of words. I wanted to allude to the focus and the rigor, right? That pursuing the science of architecture, the science in buildings brings. It takes that kind of like quantitative, rational thinking. I would say that you can be that way when you're designing. I think, one way that I explore that or could explore that with you would be to look at proportions, right? To set up matrices or grids that then become the basis where the partitions are. So things aren't just casual, but things are rooted in some, Fibonacci series or some ordering system that is operating in your work, for example. Also, the same thing could be said for studying the context and analyzing all of the materials and their proportions, understanding the windows and their proportions within the context, and then applying that same strategy, that same knowledge to your own work as a way of grounding the work in its place, in its setting. That's another way of doing that. And there are architects that go about doing their work just that way. So that's kind of the one way that I would think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm not saying you're not doing that. I'm just saying that
we're just not documenting it.
Yeah.
Okay.
in said in another way, I love that you fall in love with the process of like taking this building apart. But there is a love that you can find doing architecture by kind of putting it together formally through overlays to create the elevations, and through overlays of massing studies, through compositional overlays, material overlays, as well as like the floor plans and planning, for example. Again, not that you're by any means weak or sort of spinning your wheels on any of that stuff. It's just that I want you to have kind of a more holistic view of things as you guys move forward. Not a criticism for this project, but as you move into your own careers, think about the fruit that pays, right? Mm-hmm. And similarly, I think, like I would say just a moment ago to Nathan and to Jess, a relationship that, where both of you were trying to grab the wheel to drive you forward, which is no way to drive a car, right? You guys have shared the wheel at the right times, and this relationship has really matured. The work has really matured, and I think there's a clear sort of assignment of tasks, and you both own those tasks when you're presenting. And right now, like I said to another team, it's kind of hard to tell what Stefan did and what John did, and I actually like that you can talk about each other's work with a level of expertise, even if you didn't do the work itself. That shows a real awareness of the project and a real understanding of your own work and your partners' work. That makes the team seem strong when a client's looking in at you guys. So I think this is something that has evolved and become a virtue for you two, and I'm delighted that that's happened for you, right? That fair?
Yep.
Cool. What other comments did you have for the pertinent to the grade sheets?
No, I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory. I completely agree with you. The elevations need a little bit more work, but once we finish up with Revit and move it into something for 3D rendering, then we can start addressing those issues.
Yeah.
I think everything else is pretty much pretty good to go.
Pretty straightforward, yeah.
Yeah. For me, that metallic cheese grater material, while interesting, I'm not sure I understand how that operates as a sunscreen or a sun diminisher. So maybe thinking that through, we can talk about that next week a little bit more clearly. But I'm really intrigued with it. But I'd actually like to see it not just as a, I don't want to say gimmick, but not just as a simple small thing, but maybe as something that's much more elaborate on the building.
Okay.
If that was possible.
Okay.
Right.
Like integrated kind of.
Yeah, and more integrated, not just something like a guardrail or a transom, not just that. It can end up being just that, but like if it's really that important, if it's really a defining thing to help you achieve certain like daylighting and coefficients of comfort in the building, then let's talk about that as a real actor, in the scene here, so that it's not just a small incidental light touch thing, but it's actually a really significant speaker. It has a speaking role in this project, right?
Okay.
To be honest, I think we've gone like sort of back and forth about it. I'm not sure where we're at now, but
so operate on that instinct.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good confession. Operate on that. I think that'll help you. But yeah, really strong. I really appreciate how this has evolved, and I'm glad that you guys had Jason for some feedback. I think he enjoyed your presentation. He actually said to me afterwards that he thought that that these presentations in our class were kind of at like the level, right, that a really solid schematics package for a small project might be, like in an architect's office. He said that to me at the break. So he said that after he saw your project, for example. So that's a really nice impression to leave the critics with, as far as I'm concerned. Cool.
Thank you.
All righty. Thanks, guys. All right, Kate, and make sure you turn around and come back, around 8:30 for Dan, if not a little sooner.
Okay, will do.
Thanks. Casey and Caitlin.
Howdy.
How are you tonight? You feeling better?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When was the Freedom by Design thing? Was that for the lecture that Larry Scarpa gave?
Yeah.
Your voice is really faint tonight.
Yes, it was.
Still faint. You must. There, that's better.
My phone was on my keyboard. I don't know how that had any effect, but okay.
Noise canceling.
I guess. I don't know. It's nowhere near the mic.
Oh, you know what? Because you're an AIAS, I offered up an auction item, but I don't think anybody told me if they went ahead and did it. I asked them to redo kind of the artwork from last year, like a lunch and a tour of Hamilton Anderson. Did you see anything?
I saw the lunch tour.
Oh, so then someone did it.
What artwork? Or
well, like the card or the display that.
Oh yeah, I saw it.
Okay, so they did it then. Good. All right. All right. So you all were on Tuesday night, and that was a whole week ago. So do you have any comments about Bessie's comments? And I think she I think had a really nice impression of your work and wrote a lot about your stuff. So do you want to go into that? Do you want to go over that and talk about your reaction to her?
A lot of it was cleanup work, I think, with some comments about developing the envelopes. That's where a lot of her comments were focused. So I think that's one of our priorities that we got to set, because right now, I know even you said it seems very heavy and monolithic, I think is the
so that's my way of saying the architecture needs to be really kind of worked on, right? And here's what happens, you guys, in projects like this. So I think a natural tendency when we're designing these kinds of buildings, Caitlin and Casey, is that we extrude the volume up to the limits of the floor plan, right? And so we've got this extrusion, and we say, okay, that's kind of a three-dimensional thing. It's got a roof, it's got some street walls and end walls and courtyard walls, and okay, so I'm going to line up the floor plans right to the elevations and start dropping in the demising walls as points of reference. And then these are where the living room windows can go, and these are where the kitchens or bedroom windows can go. And you start arraying those on those skins, right? Sound about right? Sound like that's how we do it? Yeah, that's where I start, right? I start right there. And then I might do something like I might extend vertically, maybe something at the hard corner or at the ends, as a way of adding kind of some sort of detail that emphasizes an end or a corner, for example. But the most important thing is that at that moment, your work has really just begun. And that's kind of where you are right now. And the reason your work has really just begun is I want you to go back and look at the context a little bit more carefully, because the context is filled with these sort of single-family residences that comprise the block.
Yeah.
They're 2- and 3-story vertical things, right? They're they're indeed big homes. I mean, they're bigger than my home. I reckon they're bigger than your homes, although I don't know that. But, you know, you saw the slides I showed you of old historic, right? Before the demolition brush park. They were a series of unique, vertical, highly decorative, highly surfaced things, right? And so that's a vertical grain that I want you to like recognize and say, oh wow. So if that's a grain within the context, we're not there yet, because our grain, right, is horizontal. And then there's the fact that when everything is vertical within the massing of those historic brush park homes, there's a tendency to continue to emphasize the vertical, where you'll have gables that project out toward the street, or turrets and oriels that project out or hang onto the corner, like the turret at the Ransom Gillis house, right? That ends up, you know, emphasizing the vertical again. So there are ways that you can continue to emphasize the vertical by pulling masses out from that rectangular block, and beginning to sculpt that mass so that it starts to relate to the context more specifically. Then you start to look at the windows in Brush Park, and those are all verticals too, right? All the windows are vertical, and they're all double hung, and they're all tall for the most part. And occasionally there's some odd windows like ovals and tiny square windows, right? So there's some rule breaking within the pure vertical windows. So that's something I want you to take stock of. And when there's a big horizontal window in Brush Park, it's really made of 2, 3, 4 vertical windows, right? Sound familiar? Right? Yep. So those are the things that you can begin to do to help change the grain from horizontal to vertical in your work, right? The horizontal scheme that you've got is kind of the first blush, the default modeling of the architecture. I think if you start to look at the way to counteract that, right, the work is going to get interesting. I don't know what you know about Detroit. I don't know how well you know Detroit, Caitlin. I know Casey does, but if I drive down Woodward right now and I look at do you know the Ellington on Woodward at MLK, a 5-story mixed-use residential building on the corner?
I believe so.
Right, the Whole Foods is right behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So can you screen share a shot of that, Casey? Because I know you're already firing it up.
Yup.
This is not a beautiful building, but it ain't bad. And it could have gone a little further, but it did a pretty good job of creating that counter. But let's go to the 5th image on the top row. So this is a dumb, clunky horizontal box, right?
Yep.
But look, it has alternating bays of masonry that project out from the normative skin, right? And those bays are 3 windows wide. The bays have a base in dark brick, and then it has a top that's in the orange brick. AB, that's simple. 3 bays wide, where the 1 bay is inset, and that's also where the balcony projects out. That's the only rule that bay plays by. And that's a really nice, simple rule set. That bay alternates with the metal panel bay, right? Which is clearly all about horizontality, right? Because the spandrels are horizontal, the window groupings are horizontal, right? But look at the windows. They're a series of vertical windows with then two vertical like striations that go up past the roof line, right? Like the way you do kind of a dot on an eye, just to emphasize that verticality just a little bit more. It's like a serif on a letter. So that accentuates the verticality in an otherwise fairly horizontal bay. And then that whole thing alternates again, but it mirrors on the first bay that we talked about. And then the corner has a blend of things that project out, things that go up past the cornice line, right? In metal panel, it turns the corner because it's the hard corner itself, right? And it's not as big as the middle interior bay because it's working to be just a corner element. So this is a way that you can approach your own project, thinking about the thing compositionally and vertically, and then reducing it to a logical sort of program of pushes and pulls, solids and voids, right? And simple material changes. At the end of it all, this building is brick, metal, and glass. 3 materials, the Holy Trinity. And that's kind of where I want you to keep your palette to, right?
Okay.
And that's not a great building.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know the architects for that building. They're from, I think, North Carolina. So, you know, if they want to punch me in the nose, so be it. But and I even worked on that building. I actually did the entrance to the main lobby off of the street there, and I did the lobby to upgrade that sort of facility. But if you look at the Scott, right, by Newman Smith, if you look at the buildings that we did at Little Caesars Arena that surround the arena, right, the building that the restaurants are in.
That's not what I want.
Neuman. Just put Scott Building in Detroit.
Oh, God, I thought it would auto fill.
Yeah, there it is. So let's look at the rendering on the third register. Yep, thank you. Masses are extended up. Masses are pushed out. Masses are depressed, right? The materials all run in a vertical grain, but the windows and the balconies are the counterpoint. Now I'm going to throw you another curveball. Go to Falling Water. Frank Lloyd Wright. Have y'all been there?
I have not.
No.
Oh my God.
I don't travel much.
Jesus Christ. So I want you to show the third picture on the second register. Not a view you all see very often. Thank you. So, you know, all you have to do is read, you know, an autobiography or do a paper on Frank Lloyd Wright. All you have to do is look at one of his buildings. We own one, for example, and you'll drink the Kool-Aid, and you know you'll begin to understand that his work is about the horizontal, right? That the screw heads at Affleck House are all horizontal, all 40,000 of them, right? All of the brick is raked out in the horizontal courses, and all of the vertical joints are filled in with the excess mortar. Again, to emphasize the shadow line, right? The wood siding runs horizontal, right? To go with the horizontal of the brick coursing. The balconies, the fascias, right? The cornice lines, all emphasize the horizontal because it relates to Frank Lloyd Wright's pork pie hat, and it relates to his appreciation. That was a joke. And it relates to his appreciation, right, of the landscape, that architecture should be of the land, right? But truth be told, his buildings are actually incredibly vertical. So this is an image that I want you to take stock of. The elements that are the most important in this building are the ashlar masonry piers that you see running vertically throughout the entire composition and become really the fireplaces for the house, really become where the circulation returns to in the house. And it's where the most important office spaces, the kitchen space, and the sleeping room is in the house. If you go to maybe other views of this project, for example, let's look at some of them on the menu. If you zoom out a little bit.
They're all similar.
No, zoom out to all of the views. And let's look at, let's scroll down. Let's go to the black and white view on the third one there. Yeah. So here's another example of that core, right? None of this stuff that's horizontal would ever be possible structurally and formally if it wasn't for the ashlar masonry that this whole house sits upon and rises from or extends out from. So the vertical element is really key. It is the counterpoint to the horizontal. And there's kind of a compositional balance or harmony that exists here between the horizontal and the vertical. So, you know, when I say that your work tends to feel clunky or heavy, it's not because I'm being critical of it being overweight or clumsy. I'm saying that it needs to find more equilibrium between the vertical and the horizontal. This context calls for the vertical. The program creates the horizontal. So your challenge as architects seems to me, Caitlin and Casey, to sort of counteract that challenge, right, with things that help the building relate more to its context. So when you look at the Scott, when you look at Frank Lloyd Wright, right, when you look at the Albert, just as an example, even when you look at our work at Little Caesars Arena, which is bigger than any of these buildings put together, we deployed an attitude of incremental vertical things so that it wouldn't read as one clunky, heavy, squat thing, right? Because a clunky, heavy, squat thing is what you would expect in a large corporate building, like at a university or from a business, like in a suburban landscape, like the big office buildings out near I would say Somerset or in Southfield, right? So looking at those local case studies, I think will help you explore ways of graining the building in a more vertical way. That's my message to you. And I'm going to work with you for the next couple of weeks to help you get there.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Yep.
Okay, what else? And get your ass to falling water, for crying out loud. I did it 3 times when I was an undergraduate. And by the way, I had less money than you did.
How do you have less money than me? I've got $7 in the bank right now.
That's more than you had last time. Remember, you only had 3 last time, or 5?
I got $7 until Friday.
Okay, I'm going to show you. I'm pulling my wallet out right now.
Well, if you want to see what's in my wallet.
No, I'm going to show you what's in mine.
It's a debit card.
I got 1, 2. I got $2.
I'm gonna buy you 2 McChickens.
And I'll give them to you if that makes you feel better.
I don't want your bribe money.
What else do we need to go over? And what I've been saying to you is what I would say to all of you guys, right? That I think there's I need you to get past the default tendency and start to look at how the building can actually fit the context.
Yeah.
And there are ways to do that. And one of the ways of understanding the language of mixed-use buildings is to look at mixed-use buildings and then say, what the heck are they doing? How are they making this 5-story clunky thing, right? Not so heavy and clunky, even though it's clearly big and heavy and sits fully on the site. How does it seem vertical? How does it seem buoyant? How does it seem lighter? Just for that reason. Okay. What else?
Developing the courtyard.
Yeah. Right. So that was kind of like stippled.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know what's happening there.
Mhm.
Because I don't think you know what's happening there. But Casey, Caitlin, something's going to happen there.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be like gardens, water feature, shuffleboard. It's going to be hardscape, softscape. It's going to be, you know, a pergola, a picnic table, or benching, or some sort of shading device, or all of the above. It's going to be fixed tables and chairs, maybe some fixed benches, you know, movable tables and chairs and fixed benches. It's got to have an agenda, and that agenda has to make it. You have to make that agenda in such a way that it causes people to go down there. They want to go down there and have a cup of tea or drink a glass of wine at the end of the day and enjoy each other's company because you've created such a beautiful moment that that promotes that to happen. Just like you've created other beautiful moments in the building, the ground plane is one of those moments, right?
Yep. Then I don't have any more questions. I don't know if Caitlin does.
No, I have to. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to fix the that section, the wall section I had sent you before the presentation.
Yeah. I wasn't even sure that you got my comments that morning, and because the section looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
So, and I don't remember what I wrote that morning, but because it was a week ago, and it was at 5 in the morning, or 6 in the morning. So, I think the wall section needs to go from the foundation to the parapet, right? And then I think you think about the column line, you think about the insulation plane, you think about the drainage plane, you think about the airspace. All of that stuff stacks up, right? And then for you, I think the question is, you know, how do you do those balconies? How do balconies? Because you're using concrete, if I'm remembering you correctly, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do a concrete balcony that doesn't promote that transfer of the cold from outside to in? That's a tough one. And I'll help you go over that when you kind of rebuild that section, Caitlin.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not a concrete balcony.
I was about to ask if we could switch materials for the
Yeah, I mean, the concrete frame can stay intact as it is, but maybe the balcony is something completely different. Maybe it's like aluminum that has its own flooring and it's tied back from the facade, from the floor above, for example. That's why you see what I call hanging basket type balconies. Like if you've been to Chicago, or you know, if you've ever seen the Grinnell lofts in Detroit, in Corktown, they use that approach as well. But when that wafer outside, right, is getting cold in January, even March, when that's cold, and that cold goes through the skin, right, and it activates that interior slab to be cold. You'll never want to wear, you know, stocking feet to go stand at the window to like survey the city, because the floor will be cold. So this is an issue with those balconies, right? So I want you to think that through. All right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and I'll be back for Andrew and Dasman. Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Thanks, guys. Oh, shoot. I'll be right back. Okay. Dasman, Andrew?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay. Yep. You're in your truck.
Yeah, a little organization.
Andrew, are you finishing up in May as well with school?
For the bachelor's, yes.
Yeah, and because I think Dan Farrow told me that, so I wasn't sure. Because he said that you were an undergraduate on campus.
Yes, I was. So I was thinking of going for the master's through LTU. But I think just right now with work and everything, I'm trying to just get out of school and just be working.
But are you?
Get the bachelor's.
But are you from here originally or from Connecticut?
I went to LTU. I was there on campus the whole time except for the semester.
Except for this semester. So this is your first sort of year in Connecticut?
I mean, my hometown is in Connecticut, but it's my first time in Connecticut while going to LTU.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
So you were an out-of-state student at Lawrence Tech for 3 or 4 years.
Correct.
Gotcha now. I gotcha. Okay. And are you still thinking of going to grad school at Lawrence?
Not sure. I think I'll hold off for now. Maybe
Okay.
in the future. But work is just too busy to pass up right now. So.
Sure. Yeah, you look busy. I've seen your stuff on Instagram, and I can tell that's keeping your schedule very compressed. And you even alluded to that in a note back to me at one point. So I definitely recognize that. So the only chance I'll have to meet you is if I visit my sister-in-law in Greenwich. So when I'm out there, I'll let you know. Because it's not far from there, right? Good.
No, it's about half an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would urge you to go see the Glass House Estate off of Ponus Ridge Road and the Merritt Parkway. You need a reservation, but that's where it's located. That's the Philip Johnson Estate. He has a huge compound of about 40 acres, and the Glass House happens to be one of the many buildings there, and that's where he lived.
Oh wow! I didn't know if you were open to go to that, or if that was like a private residence.
Yeah, it's owned by the Trust for Historic Preservation. So it's you just have to have a reservation, pay a small sort of fee. So okay, good. So and Desmond, you can hear me okay? Okay, so you guys had a much better showing this week. I think maybe I'll look at Andrew instead of watching Desmond eat an onion ring. I was pleased with where you took the project and that you've made kind of this improvement, a fairly big improvement in terms of like pure numbers from where you were to where you are now. But I really want to help you get somehow to a different number, a higher number, right, as you move into the next 4 weeks. So let's talk a little bit about what Betsy said and how those comments mean what they mean to you, and let's see if there's something in there that we need to build on, and then we can talk about my comments. All right, so let's start with Betsy's.
As far as us talking about her comments, or are you talking about them?
Yeah. So Desmond, do you want to do that, since I don't know if Andrew has anything to look at?
Yeah, I remember a few things she said, so I can talk about it.
Okay.
Well, I just liked how. Oh God, this is long. Okay, I liked how she was like kind of excited about our work.
Yeah.
And made us excited about it.
Sure.
And she talked about how she liked the interior designing of it and how it was important to tie that into the context of the city. So it was helpful.
Anything else?
Well, for her, yeah, that's it.
You can't say no to mom.
I'm not her mom. Stop.
And then what about the comments I wrote?
So, you commented about like the amount of like the spinning things for the gym rooms, and I was wondering what kind of like space should we do instead of that, because it is a corner where there's no windows.
Well,
Like, that's where the
first of all, I want you guys to be more. So, like when you did 4 spinning rooms, right? That should have sent off a red flag between one of you two, right? So, and then making sure that you needed that many units inside of a room that large, that the room had to be that large, for example. So that's one way to sort of talk about it, is noticing those issues before they become a problem that we talk about. So that's something I want you to be more attuned to. The second thing is, it may simply be a matter of saying, okay, we're only going to do 2 exercise rooms in this development. But even then, I don't think there needs to be that much equipment in each. In the 10-story building I did in Royal Oak, we just had 1 exercise room amidst 95 units. So that kind of gives you the measurement or the metric. That's one thing. The other possibility is that they could be like laundry facilities. They can be storage, like on-floor locker storage rooms. They can be business centers. So those are the other kinds of programs that spaces like that fit within that sort of hinge space can succeed with. All right.
And then I noticed that one of your comments too was exterior rendering that we didn't have yet. I had a question about that. I know we were talking about the different type of exterior, and one of the mentions was that if we do brick all the way up, it might be too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time,
I want you to understand what I mean by that. Heavy in terms of like literally the weight of brick, running all the way up those 5 floors, and thinking about what that means in terms of tying it back to the structure at each floor. And the more brick that you build in a vertical height, the bigger the foundations get, right? And the more pressure that puts on all of the brick at the lower level. So like all the brick on the 5th floor is compressing on the brick of the 4th floor, and all of the brick on the 5th and 4th floor is bearing on the 3rd floor, right? So pretty soon, at some moment, Andrew, and you're a carpenter, you'll appreciate this, as we're tying back all that brick to the wall, we're actually going to be having a lot more wood in the wall to tie that brick. So suddenly that's going to limit the amount of openings and the size of those openings on the 2nd floor, for example. That's going to make it a pain in the ass to run conduit and power through those outside walls if there's studs everywhere to pick up all that dead load of the brick. So when you think about brick as a structural, as a wall enclosure, it's a great material. I love masons. I'm a Masonry Institute scholarship winner. You know, those are my best friends. But in a building like this, right, that brick is problematic because if you have a wood stud backup, for example, there's going to be a lot more wood on the 2nd floor than you even imagine. It's going to be twice as much as there is on the 4th and the 5th floor. So that's an issue. So if it ain't brick, what is it? And so that starts to go into the conversation I was just having with Casey and with Caitlin, is thinking about like a palette of like 3 materials where you know, glass is one of them, glass and metal frames. And then, so what can that be? And thinking about lighter weight skins is what I'm encouraging you to do. But only 2 materials, really? Because I really want to keep this building simpler for you so that you can like complete the building and finish the building.
Okay.
So metal panel.
Something.
Yeah, well, metal panel, fiber reinforced concrete panels, Oco skin. You know, these are all veneers that are, like, in terms of dead load weight, very light. They're bigger panels, they're bigger elements, bigger than brick, so they go up a little bit faster. right? And so that's something to think about. Now, the examples I just showed Caitlin and Casey, like at the Ellington in Detroit on Woodward at MLK, that kind of newish, it's about 10 years, 15 years old now, a newish mixed-use building on the corner there. That uses brick, but it uses it in very limited bays. So it's 3 units or 3 window units wide. It's like 30 feet, and it's 5 floors. And then it's a bay of a lightweight material, and then it's a bay of brick, for example. And it just alternates as it makes its way right around the building's footprint. So that's another way of reducing that problem, right? But being smarter about the skin.
So they just have like 30-foot bays with no windows in them?
No, if you look at the example, can you fire up
yeah.
Can you fire that up and screen share it?
What's it called?
Ellington in Detroit.
I know that guest speaker was talking about brick, and she seemed kind of excited, and she said there's a lot you could do with brick. So was she talking about if we did that as a whole building, or just like what you're trying to explain in different sections?
I think you could do either one. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm concerned about something that she's not concerned about.
I see. Okay. I was like the facade. It looks like it's in brick for this.
Yeah, here it is. Right. So there's like a 30-foot bay in brick that has 2 large window groupings, and then a similar large window grouping, but it has inset windows with projecting balconies. And then it alternates with a metal bay, and then another brick bay, and then another metal bay, and then a brick bay, and then a metal bay, right? So that big, clunky, heavy, horizontal mass sits on that site from alley to street, right? From street, which is Woodward in this view, back to the alley, but it's divided up into these vertical units, which are actually, right, the column lines. So this is a way of, using only 2 materials plus the aluminum sash and glass. So let's go back to your, you can cancel that image and go back to your drawing, for example. So this looks like it's trying to limit the amount of brick, right? Which I think is admirable. So maybe it's only at the ends or at the corners. And maybe it's only at the base, for example. That way, everything above it is a much more lightweight material. And I think that's desirable. Which view is this, guys?
I was working on renderings.
So this is the John R. view, correct? Looking south and west?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the corner.
Mm-hmm. All right. What else did I bring up that you wanted to go over?
Well, we worked on the parking over the weekend, so we got all the spaces underneath. So that's good.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to look at that next week because I don't want to have to talk about that anymore. We're all at that point, I think, where we need to have that, licked and solved. So, and I think you guys are really close on that.
And I think the lobby floor you mentioned also having all the names of what spaces are in there. That was something also.
Yeah, it's not clear. It's not clear how you're using that. And I think at the end of it all, you guys, you have a lot of content on the first floor. It may be exactly all of the rooms that the program calls for, but I'm not sure because I don't know what's happening in those rooms. And they all kind of neatly fit within that big rectangular block on the John R. facade, on that John R. leg. So if that can be smaller or narrower, right, to give more open space to the ground plane for landscaping, I'd be interested in that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, your parking is not completely enclosed. It's open for the most part, but you will need to ventilate it. You all need to ventilate it. You all need to suck out of that parking level the noxious fumes that, you know, car motors running produce, whether they're idling for their owner when it's cold out to start them up, you know, that they start them up in their apartment and they get downstairs and the seats are warm, the steering wheel's warm, and the radio's on. You know, that kind of thing produces all of that noxious gas. So we have to have an exhaust fan in the basement that sucks all of that out, and it has to spit it out up at grade. So ventilation and parking.
Gotcha.
Now, I think Dan had questions too. So you want to make sure that you manage his concerns with my concerns. My concerns are slightly different than his, because mine have to do with, you know, the design and the execution of the design. So make sure that you both are attentive to him on that. All right.
Okay. Are we meeting with him at 8:30? Is he talking to everybody? Or?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to invite him when I'm done with Alec and Trevor.
Okay.
All righty. Anything else over there?
That's everything.
Okay. Well, again, I'm pleased that you guys are meeting each other halfway right now. I need you to continue that as you move into this next push, this next sort of phase, the phase between benchmark 2 and 3. I need you both to carry your weight equally and make sure that the work tasks, the workload is balanced, so that, you know, each of you are doing the things you're interested to do, so that you do those things very well. And I also need you to you know, aspire, right, to do even better than you did for the next benchmark, because the trend grade, or the trend is of your work this semester is a consideration. It has a coefficient factor in the final grade. So in other words, if you continue to do better throughout the semester, I value that. Because that shows that you're getting it as we move into the semester. It shows that you're doing better than the last benchmark, and the stakes of each new benchmark are actually higher, right, than the one that came before them. So as you do better, you're doing it against higher stakes. So this is why I give consideration for students that improve, right, over the course of time. So whatever I need to do to help you do this better, let me know what that is. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Hung, I just saw your picture. You have these really cool like snowmobile glasses that you wear in your portrait picture. Those are awesome. They're like safety glasses, maybe.
I just normal class.
I love those. I got to get a pair of those. You look like Corbu. Okay, Bodger, Hong, and Nora. Nora, I hear you, but I don't see your. There you are. Yeah, I see you now. Yep. And Bodger's there, of course, in one of his many Adidas outfits. Good for you, Bodger.
Oh, I only wear Adidas sportswear.
You're making me dizzy. I'm going to go back to Nora. You're moving too fast.
Well, I was moving my laptop.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about Betsy's comments.
She said not much on the design and too heavy on the technical side of it.
Mm-hmm.
She said something about structural being on its way. And let's see. Not clear. Life safety not clear at this point.
Yeah, so maybe she just needed more clarification on that. On to your credit, though, you guys dealt with life safety and occupant load before any of the other groups. So that's kind of surprising. I know that stuff is still in there, and at this benchmark, I saw additional information about life safety. So I think you were you're to be commended for that.
Okay.
I do think, though, if I can pause on that, because I think I talked a little bit about it in my remarks earlier this semester, and I reiterated them, that you have some high occupant load uses on the southeast leg that still only have one means of egress. And I think that's going to be a problem for you. So we can talk about that maybe in a little bit. But I want to stay on, because I want to stay on Betsy's comments.
Okay. I guess in terms of that comment that she said how we had less design and more technical. I can agree to that. I mean, I think we did focus a lot on the technical in this benchmark, trying to delve more into
which was the deal, right? I mean, that was the issue.
But also, I agree that we need to bring the design. I wouldn't say like the design aspect, but how we deliver and explain our design should be bumped up along with the technical. I do see that as a potential to improve.
Good. Okay. And was there anything else in her comments that we need to go over? I'm remembering all of this now.
I'm having a hard time reading something thoughtful site analysis, lots of diagrams, some move.
More useful than others.
Okay.
She's complimenting you. Are you not used to compliments, Nora?
No, I wasn't sure. And then I'm having a hard time reading her
She said we are a bit heavy on the technical details of structure and system.
No.
The structural package was pretty solid in this one.
Seems like too many horizontal. What is she talking about? The horizontal 3-hour separation for
Horizontal 3D. That's what I think.
So did you have 3 hours between each floor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she challenges that.
Why?
I remember that as well. So I think you only need the 3 hour really between the first floor and any residential above it. I don't think that you need that kind of horizontal assembly between each use, right? So if you go back to the code study that John and Stefan did, or even just consult with them, they will prove that out. Also, if you look at the code sheet that Betsy did, right, for this building from our office, which is on the drive for you guys to look at and use, you'll see that it's it will say that as well. Here's the other thing that she said to me that she was kind of not I won't say alarmed by, but kind of surprised by. You guys can design a 3 hour separation between each floor. Knock yourself out. Yeah, I'm good with that. The city would love that, right? Your homeowners might even love it, right? But there's a cost, right, to doing that, to achieving the 3 hour separation. And what she's trying to get you to do is to remember that as designers, you can go with the lowest rating, the lowest hourly rating, and the lowest combustible category that height and area with a sprinklered building allows. And there's ways that you can actually do 5B over the residential, over the retail rather, over mercantile in a 5-story building like this.
I was gonna ask you a question. There's a building that the university where I work, they leased, and it's fully sprinkled, but you do not see the sprinkle heads. It's fire depths.
So those are probably just recessed.
They're just recessed. But,
Yeah.
But it's not your traditional fire sprinkle building.
What's the use of the building?
It's medical.
Yeah, they don't. Is it office or is it clinical?
Both.
Yeah, they don't want those nasty things collecting dust and, you know, making the environment that where testing and examinations are happening to be, you know, obnoxious, right? And something that someone has to feather dust, you know, so they pay more for the fully concealed sprinkler head, which is expensive because it's got more bells and whistles to it.
Okay.
Also, I was just
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, in terms of the fire rating, it's not necessarily we are trying to get it to 3 because
I know
the city would like it. It's in a way just because of how our structural system is.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
know,
just-
and that's where I'm glad you said that, because that's what I want you to be clearer about. It may, by your design, have achieved a 3-hour rating, right? But you need to make a distinction in the graphics that say that the rating is really this. The design rating is really this, but its practical hourly rating happens to be 3 because of the UL listing or the assembly listing, for example, provided by the manufacturer. That's what she's. Oh, why are they doing 3 hours there? You don't need 3 hours there, Mark. Why are they over designing? That was her comment to me the next morning.
Well, I think I remember that she did. I think she mentioned to 2 groups how we were doing more than what we necessarily needed.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
And she was also saying, why is everybody doing composite slabs on metal deck on steel with, you know, oatmeal sprayed on it? Don't they know they can do it in wood? I'm like, yeah, they know that. We're just trying to give them we're trying to acclimate them to these other structural systems so that they can test them. She goes, yeah, but that's not going to really happen in an office. That's not going to really happen with a client. I know. So like, there's that conversation that I had with her.
That's it.
So when she sees concrete and when she sees steel, she kind of freaks out because she's like, why are they wasting all of that time and all of that money, right, to achieve such a robust structural deck when they can do it with pre-engineered wood trusses at 16 inches on center, right, with wood studs and a little bit of red iron to pick up something on the roof, right? And she's true because she's always right. But the class is trying to coax you to accept a structural system and then carry it forward.
So Betsy also made a comment about HVAC. She said it seems logical, the relationship between supply and return. But you and Dan commented, said it's the supply and return too close to each other.
Dan was concerned about that.
Is there a distance?
You're creating kind of a loop, and you know there is a loop, right? Because eventually the stuff that is supplied to the space hits the return and it cycles back through again. But you want to have the minimum distance, which is probably like 8 feet or 10 feet. You want to make sure that you try to achieve that minimum distance.
8 or 10 feet.
Or whatever the manufacturer requires. In a Magic Pack, that's why you'll see, you know, the supply up high and the return down low, for example.
Okay.
So like stack on top of each other, but they're separated?
Yep.
Okay.
I try to have the supply return not in and out, but like align with each other.
Yeah, just so that they're composed. That was something that I was commenting about the other day as well.
That makes sense.
So this package was a really strong package as well, right? In terms of like you guys moved the needle forward several sort of points, and I was glad for you guys. I felt really good about where you took it, and I'm feeling better, and I hope you're feeling that sense of achievement. I hope you're feeling that way. So I want to keep that momentum going for you as well. I've always appreciated that you've already sort of developed that sort of one money shot as a rendering, but I think that there's more views that you need to prepare.
Yeah, there's still more renderings coming.
Right, and I think there are some interior renderings that you'll want to prepare as well, and then there are some special moments in your building, and maybe it's those you know, kids' rooms, libraries, those spaces that, you know, we still have to solve the egress component with, or egress component for, that could be really interesting spaces to delineate in a perspective or in a rendering. So those are some things to think about.
I do have the library and the gym.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yep, I remember that now. And you always, yeah, you guys have like the 5 or 6 interior renderings as well. I'll want to talk to you guys about those next week, because I want to give you some feedback on how you compose a view. Where do you take the elevation at, and how you maybe arrange people in those spaces, that kind of thing. Because those renderings look markedly different than the street rendering. And I think they should look like these all came from, you know, the same team.
Because like we never actually have any feedbacks about the render. That was like on the side there.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you had those, because they help build up the explanation for the project, right? You started to show things that the plans couldn't show, right? You showed spaces that were interesting and deserved that kind of attention. And those were things that contributed to the improvement.
Yeah, this one shot of the render where I try to show. We talk about using the exposed ceiling.
Yeah.
Lights. And that's why I tried to show where you can actually see the HVAC ducts.
Right.
With the ceiling, and where the lights hanging, dropping down like that.
Yeah, I love the perforated ceiling. That's a pretty nifty idea. I think that in some spaces that might be a noisy ceiling, a noisy room, because the metal is reflective, and that's something you have to be concerned about or be alert to. And how do you deal with that, for example? So
those ceiling panels, actually acoustic panels, and
then I was going to say, and then there might be a way that this is an acoustical product, so then you need to sort of portray that as well.
Okay, all right. I put more information about the actual product presentation.
I guess I have a question in terms of the parking lot. So Dan made a comment about how he's concerned about how air circulation is going to be working out there. And so I was looking into jet vents and jet fans in terms of trying to allow air circulation to enter from a supply fan and then like have an exhaust. And I was wondering, what do you think about this kind of system? Is it something that's present in the US? Because I found something about jet vents, but it's an Irish company that provides them, and that's in Europe. And I was wondering,
so I'll tell you, we're not doing the bullets in the ceiling at Brush Park. We're not doing anything in the ceiling, but Dan is I think keen on letting you guys try that. And this is obviously a conversation you want to revisit with Dan, so I encourage you to do that. What we're doing at Brush Park is we have a 10-foot by 6-foot sort of room that has a giant grill in it, with a fan in it, and it draws the air from the parking level into it and runs it up vertically like a periscope, right? And then spits it out into the alley, so that when it runs on a kind of a thermostatic setting, that whenever the noxious levels reach a certain moment or threshold, that fan kicks on, or it just kicks on a timer. I can't remember what Christoph told me and what Betsy told me, but basically we just suck the air into it and spit it out back into the alley, because there's no door at the bottom of the ramp. There's just like a chain link security gate. So that whole lower level is open to the ambient temperature, right? So that's how we've done it.
Right.
But having a strategy that at least does that, I think, is going to be helpful.
Well, see, you mentioned that, and I definitely took that idea and tried to implement it in our parking plan. So we had that room with that's supposed to depict the fan that would just kick in whenever. But from his comments, I understood that maybe that was not enough.
That may not be.
Okay.
It's currently enough for the city of Detroit, and based on what we're doing there, but he may be wanting you to look at for some reason a different code or a different set of restrictions that maybe our team just was not aware of.
Okay.
So let's make sure we circle back with Dan and
Right.
talk with Professor Farrow, okay?
Yes.
What else did I say, or that we need to go over?
Something about the elevations. You said that
Oh,
that's
yeah.
not appropriate response.
Yeah, so I said that a couple of times. I'm just still feeling, and we talked a little bit about this with Caitlin and Casey, and just a few minutes ago with Dasman and Andrew. It's a big building. It's a tall building. It's a mass building because it has so much program in it. And I think the default reaction at this moment, at this level, is to simply compare the elevation to the plan and drop windows in where the plan's telling you. And, you're done, right? It's a building. Yeah, it's a building. But what I'm trying to get you all to appreciate in this particular place, in this historic context, and I know that you're not from here, Nora, so you're going to have to rely on Vajra and Hung to sort of describe this more effectively than I can. But this is a stridently vertical context. This is a context of narrow, tall masonry homes that have vertical proportions, have vertical elements within those vertical proportions, like oriels and cupolas and chimneys and roofs and gables, and they have vertical windows. So to do anything, contrary to that would be kind of inappropriate to that historical context. So, but I'm not saying that you guys should be doing oriels and chimneys, and that kind of thing. But maybe there are cues from the context that allow you to approach this squat horizontal thing as something that's more vertical. So how do you take the things that are really horizontal and create a composition that's a series of verticals? And if you look at good work by good architects, they're usually blending the vertical and the horizontal effectively. When you look at Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright, when you look at the work of Lake and Flato out of Houston, when you look at the work you guys here in Detroit, when you look at the Scott and the Albert, they do this very effectively, right? So this is something that I'm trying to get you to do, is to look at these elevations as a design opportunities that go beyond just dropping windows in where the plan's telling you. Look at the skyline, look at the silhouette, look at material distinctions. Try to treat the building mass as perhaps a series of masses. I'm not saying do a whole bunch of like finicky, detailed stuff. I'm also trying to say deal with a palette of materials that's really simple. Because even with just one material, you can have great variety because you can change the grain and direction. You can change the paint colors, right? So that's got to be liberating. That's where I'm going. And that's what I meant by that.
Okay.
I agree.
Cool. I'll let you move on.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks. Good job.
Thank you.
Trevor and Alec, are you guys there?
Yep, we're here.
Cool. Okay, and another, move the needle up, move the needle forward. I was appreciative of that, and I hope that you guys, have the same sense, the same feeling, and that you'll build on that. You want to go over Betsy's comments?
Yeah, we can. Alec, I can start off if that's all right.
Sure.
So I started to touch on earlier her encouragement of the courtyard, and so since Tuesday I started to talk with actually a coworker about how I could maybe solve the last couple of issues on the parking level, and he gave me some suggestions that I'm working on to give us that entire space to work with, just to make it a little bit more desirable of a surface area to use. And I found her overall comments pretty encouraging for the rest of the building too. I think she pointed out where we have a little bit of room to grow in terms of like the life safety, not just considerations of it, but showing the diagrams that warrant those comments. So I thought all in all, it was pretty constructive from her side.
Yeah, and you guys, you guys didn't have anything on that category, as I recall. So there's some like low-hanging fruits there, right? There's like low-hanging points that can help you just a lot just by having them the next time.
Right. I think she mentioned, or maybe it was Professor Farrow who said, take the visual diagram that we had of the fire safety. It was showing just the separations that we had, and then that should be applied to all of our life safety considerations per what's in the code.
Yeah, I think that diagram was really good. I think she just wanted to see it in more elaborated more elaborate and more elaborated on. So I think that you're to be given credit for that as well.
Gotcha.
For having
it was. I thought it was really helpful. And her delivery was good too. It was really clear what she was looking for, and I kind of liked her bias from the landscape perspective, because that was something, to be quite honest, I hadn't really put as much thought into this semester, but it's definitely important in the next phase when we get into rendering and making this look like a composition.
A place. Yeah, a place. Okay, good.
Alec, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think one of her other comments that I kind of remembered more significantly was she talked about our development of the sort of sense of progress, how the building came together. She didn't quite understand it, and I think that we developed it really well, but we just didn't show it very well in that particular presentation as we had in previous ones.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you've done a better job before,
right,
of telling that story. And I think hearing that comment now will put that on track,
right,
for benchmark 3. I think she's right, though. I think that it was too abrupt, and I think
we got into the finer details.
I think it deserves to be told again.
Right, and I think that's valuable for us going into the last benchmark. We can get that narrative nailed down and really prominent in our final presentation.
Good goal. So let's work on that. We can look at that next week.
Yeah.
Anything else about Betsy's comments?
I share some of the same sentiments as Trevor. Really, the landscape perspective. I think it was good to have, especially since both of us we haven't been really thinking about it as it hasn't been at the top of our list for the putting this building together. But we do have an opportunity where that courtyard is. So that's something I'm looking forward to addressing, moving into as we finish up.
Outstanding. Do you want to go over things that I wrote about?
Yeah, sure. I thought I haven't pulled up here. I was I liked.
I don't, so I'm going to rely on you.
I liked your appreciation for our the application of that little illustrative style for our diagramming the those perspectives and experiencing or experimenting with our intent, how we can maybe change up those materials.
Nope, I
caught that basically. Yep. That was us thinking more in depth about how these exterior materials can all come together as we move forward in the next couple of weeks. I was pretty. There weren't really any surprises, I guess I should say. It makes, I think it's all constructive and helps clarify what areas we really need to elevate for the next the final benchmark, and then what things we're doing well to continue using to our advantage.
Are you going to be able to solve the basement level to be more, I don't want to say efficient, but maybe less quirky and more inclusive of all spaces? I think you can actually get all of them down there. I mean, when you only get 3 on the ground floor, you're like so bloody close that, like,
and really,
it seems like I would want to like not let that piece of meat go. I'd want to keep chewing on that to make it work.
Yeah, we even had one more just that I put in there originally because the little backup space we had, there was extra room if we were saying we were going to put them on the first floor too. But with those changes that I've been looking into, like I mentioned before, I think that we can get all 50 underneath.
Brilliant. So like I said to someone else earlier today, I'd like to have this thing licked by Tuesday. I'll look at it sooner if I need to, but because you'll really want to focus on putting the rest of the building together, vis-a-vis the wall section, the energy modeling sort of thing, maybe the comm check. That's another option that you could consider for your work. So there's going to be a lot more to focus on, and I knew that the parking level was going to be a stumbling block for everyone. And but I know that you're pretty close to it.
I think fortunately, I personally didn't feel like it imposed any new issues for us. Like we tried to be pretty conscious of the column grid through the planning of that, which is kind of how we ended up with such a lazy river of a circulation under there. But so I guess I'm looking at the bright side of that, saying as soon as we can fit those extra 2 spaces down there, there shouldn't be anything else that jumps out in the way of that being taken care of.
I agree. What else did I talk about?
One of the other comments that stood out to me was at the beginning you said that right now our building appears big and heavy. And I was kind of hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on what you think can be done.
What were the materials? Because you guys also had another set of unusual but intriguing drawings that, as I recall, that kind of talked about grain and talked about kind of material priorities or something like that.
Right.
Let's maybe talk about those drawings and maybe help me understand what you were getting at with those exercises.
Okay, so we wanted to keep the material the same throughout, but change the color and texture. So the assembly is consistent, and the material palette's the same, but we can give some variance to the facade by simply changing the orientation and changing the color of those metal panels. And Trevor's pulling it up right now.
Yeah.
So we wanted to divide or change the material based on programming, or change the color of the material based on the program of the interior of the space, and then change the texture based on visual opportunities to show a vertical grain versus a horizontal grain, based on how the different pieces had come together from the interior. So the vertical columns or the vertical grains come together on the ends of the building, one end, because we have a stacked set of program, which goes between laundry and exercise space. And then there's in the middle on that John R. facade, there's another vertical grain where the balconies line up between rooms, and between those, it's the horizontal grain just connects the two. And again, on the Alfred Street wing, we have balconies lining up that offer opportunity for the vertical emphasis.
So I love that. You didn't say any of that in the review,
right?
And you can say that in fewer words, with some diagrams. But I want to and I love what you're saying. So I'm wanting to show you a building by. So I'm going to screen share it. I don't know. Maybe I've already done this building with you. I think I alluded to it with Betsy. So can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, this is David Salmela. He's lectured at UDM a couple of times. And this is a mixed-use building. It's actually an existing building that he's done an addition to. So the existing building was like a one-story thing, and he's done this addition to it. So I want you to see what he's done with the vertical grain things that you've just mentioned, Alec. It's kind of a polycarbonate skin that has a vertical graining to it that allows the graining to be evident from the street, but its property is also translucent, so that it allows people to see people walking on the fire stair and people in the fire stair to see out to the street, right? Notice this skin is all white. And then I want to show you, maybe I need to show a bigger image of that. So here's that same vertical striated polycarbonate. And so now this is metal panel, this is metal panel, right? White over the black. Let me go back. And that graining finds its way into the interior, right? So that you extend that language into the architecture. This is the back facade. This is all horizontal siding in metal panel, one material, two colors, right? And so he draws and quarters that facade and makes it a little bit more manageable in size, right? Just because it's these sort of graphic play blocks or kids play block. And here's that front facade. So this is a very interesting notion that you're bringing up. I actually like this a lot. I like the way that you're trying to codify the building. I know. Yeah, here's some plans. I know there are other examples. Oh. So these are the drawings. But if you look at the elevation drawings down below, I think you could see the real simple approaches to the elevation. I think it's actually much more interesting in person than it is, or in the pictures than it is in the in those drawings. But the idea of a single material that has one or two colors and one or two grain directions is really interesting. And in your case, maybe the polycarbonate panel is the way that you approach your vertical conditions, like he did here.
Right.
Like he does here. Yeah, I thought there were more pictures. Let me see. This is that polycarbonate. So it's on its own galvanized metal sort of palette. See, it's all unitized.
Yeah.
And then the skin is anchored to it. That's quite lovely. I think we're back again to the beginning. Oh, that Cortens thing, that's the elevator.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what that is on the right. And that's what that is here. So that's what he's done. But if you look at all of his work, David Salmela, you'll see that rigor, you'll see that sense of discipline in it. I think that the black and white drawings that are the cartoons of what you're trying to do are actually something I didn't appreciate as much tonight or as much that night as I do tonight. So I think that's the diagram that you keep moving forward. And that's the diagram that should challenge you to say, okay, let's test this in the elevations now. Let's apply this to the two street facades, and let's let the shit get real. Let's find out what these materials are and start to delineate them and test them as elevation studies. Okay? I'm not so concerned about it now for you guys. So figure out that parking plan and maybe start to do some overlays of the elevation and bring all the other stuff along that Professor Farrow is asking you to. You guys are going to be syncing pretty nicely, I think, in the next few weeks.
I like the direction we're headed.
Yeah, I think we're in a pretty good spot so far. And
right, I think there, aside from a few annotation issues, there wasn't too much concern, at least after benchmark 2 on the detailing side. I think short of the structural details needing a little bit more attention. So that was encouraging too, and I think I'm confident too that any questions that do pop up along the way,
well, you can go to either of us. So
yeah,
I'm good with that.
Right.
Yeah,
so those are kind of the black and white, so to speak, where you know, there's. So yeah, other than that, I thought I was pretty encouraged with the feedback from both you, Professor Farrow, and then also from Betsy on last week.
Agreed.
Okay, well, keep grinding along, and I'll visit with you again next week. I think we have Daniel here. Let's see.
Yep, just pulled in.
Good evening, Dan.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you tonight?
I'm fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. We're good, and they're all yours. So I just to let you catch up. So we had the review, as you know, without you on Thursday, but with Jason, and that worked out to be really lovely. We dealt with 3 students, and then I think you had a chance to look at the YouTube video of that. And then I know that you gave written feedback in several exchanges with the team members that presented that night, as well as maybe some of the others that you saw on Tuesday night. And then tonight, I kind of had a general discussion, not only about the session and that experience at Benchmark 2 reviews from last week, but we kind of like opened up the April calendar and did again a more careful look ahead as we move into the last 5 weeks of the class. So and the one big milestone that we have approaching is April 5th, when Dustin is our guest lecturer for the energy modeling component of the studio. So I think they're in good shape. I met with all of the teams individually, starting with the last presenters first tonight, and we just finished.
Okay. So I've been sending some people a few things and responding to questions. So maybe I'll just try to recap a few talking points for today. So if you're looking at your email today, you would have seen an earlier email with some HVAC information attached. There were, I think, 2 or 3 lectures that were PDFs, and then there were a couple of web links. Hopefully those will help fill in some of the background on overview for HVAC systems and where we're headed. I would say for the most part, about 2/3 of the teams seem to be moving along fairly well, and about 1/3 of you seem to be still in need of getting caught up. Of that 2/3, I think most of you seem to have addressed the unit design pretty well, and that's not so much an ongoing issue. Then I think 1 or 2 of you have gone into the common element spaces as well, and so that's good that you've moved along there. So hopefully that the rest of you will start to get caught up. Please just select one of those 5 options we gave you, do the background work that you need, and then just sort of move on. So if you look at the other material that I sent you just recently, you'll see a little bit of an overview of the major elements that make up an HVAC system and where some of those elements are typically placed within the building. So please take a look at that material as well. I had a couple of references I provided regarding sprinklers, since there were some questions on sprinkler placements. So there's a couple of tools in there that allow you to make some quick decisions about sprinkler locations and issues for residential sprinklering requirements. Remember, closets, bathrooms do not need sprinklers. So I would be surprised if most units have more than 3 or 4 sprinkler heads in them. Normal spacing is about 8 feet on center for the most part. So I don't think there's a lot more that I have to say other than that. I think there's just some general information about their locations that's relevant, and that's about all. In terms of where we are with structures, I think for the most part, we seem to have resolved issues where structural vertical alignments are now taking place. We don't seem to need transfer beams and issues of that sort. I think those are taken care of for the most part fairly well. Most of you seem to have selected your systems, and you seem to have started on that. For the most part, it looks like conditions like parking configurations are being resolved with the structural system. So I think that's starting to come along without too much difficulty. I would say the issues to keep in mind would be, again, if you have large spans, it's okay if you keep a lot of large spans, because you do reduce the number of members in the system and you do reduce the number of foundations or footings, and that's not a bad property. But if you have, one bay, let's say, in the system that's a large span, and then all the rest are fairly smaller spans or mid-sized spans, then that floor to ceiling height for that parking structure, because you have to hit the minimum clearance, is going to be governed by that. So that kind of, in a sense, adds more volume perhaps than you might want. So I know we had some discussions last time with one of the teams about, what if we added a column here? Would it really disrupt your parking? And then we'd have a more regulated equal bay system. So maybe that's working out for you. I'm not sure, but that would be one suggestion. I think there's a team that has, we've got a couple teams, I think, that, or these 3 teams that are looking at wood. And I think one of them has trusses. Is that Nathaniel and Jess? Is that right?
Yes.
So that you've got pros and cons in that, and probably Professor Farla may have talked about them. You know, you may have to be more cognizant of vibration control and acoustic control between the floors. Maybe have to watch more of the STC rating there. The positive side of having a truss, of course, is it allows you pass-through space, right? You've got
right for mechanicals and ductwork.
All that goes through, so that's the positive side of it. In terms of structural, I think the other issues to think about would be, most of you seem to have addressed your gravity loads, so we can kind of follow through and walk through how the gravity loads work and are transferred through the building. That seems to be resolved. I think on the other side, lateral loads, maybe only a couple teams have worked through that. I think you need to start thinking about lateral loads. You know, where would you have a shear wall, a rigid bay, or a braced bay in your system? A number of you, some of you I've tried to give some suggestions to already. If you have vertical continuity with demising walls, that means going all the way through the floors. And if you could actually maybe allow a few of those walls to go through the first or grade level, that means cutting through retail, for example, that would be a good opportunity to have a shear wall through the building. That would be something to consider. For wood construction, rigid frames, they're more difficult to provide or to make because wood is not as strong as steel or concrete. I think there was the one team that we talked about that's got, I know a couple of you've got delta beams, but one of you we talked about using the rigid connections in the delta beam.
I think that's Rogers and Nora's group.
I think so. I mean, semi-rigid connections with concrete, you know, you're going to get, not only are you going to get stiffness for lateral loads, but you're also going to be reducing the beam size, because the beam size can be dropped by about 30% with the rigidity at the column. It reduces the moments, right? So it drops the size of the beam. That's a good property. That means the floor to floor can even get smaller, possibly, in terms of height. So if you've got a system where you've got a lot of those rigid connections through most of the bays, I'm not sure, other than maybe having a core system, let's say the elevators and stairs, if you need much more than that. Given the height of this building and the semi-rigid bays throughout the building, you may be fine with that. Some of you do need to work on your construction type classifications, making sure you understand that. I would agree with Betsy Williams. I think that to a degree, you might find that type 5 could work, you know, if you take another look at some of those. Now, you might ask, well, why does he make a big deal out of that? Well, it does affect the fire ratings of the enclosures on the exterior wall. So, you know, if you say, well, I've got type 1 and then that suggests that you've got non-combustible materials on the exterior wall, then you've got to make sure that your cladding is non-combustible. That means some materials have to be either flame retardant or flame treated, or they're going to have to be non-combustible materials. And it's not just the skin, so to speak, or the exterior walls, but also it's going to be your insulation. So if you're thinking, oh yes, I want to use a polyisosonory, you know, expansive foam because it's going to give me a height like an R value of 6 per inch and it's going to seal the cracks, that's great, but it's flammable. Can't put it in there. You're going to have to go to like a rock wool or a mineral wool as an alternate. So keep that in mind. It does have an impact at that level. In terms of HVAC systems, I guess another comment would be, think about maybe when you're laying out the ducts in the space, you know, if you realize that if you do think it looks like you do have to have a drop down in the ceiling, you know, you have to drop the ceiling down for a duct. Some of you might want to think about the spatial implications on the inside of the unit. For example, you know, where do you want to create sort of like a soffit drop down? I mean, maybe it's like a dividing wall or dividing element between two rooms, like a living room or a bedroom or a living room and kitchen. And then you can sort of hide the duct in there, right? You can tuck the duct in that location. And so you're making that duct location into some element that's coordinated with your spatial conditions. Maybe it's along a wall and you want to build out a bookcase or something like that, or you can imagine that could happen there. That's another place to do it. So I would say some of the units I've just seen ducts dropped in all over, and I guess that's okay. But if you do think of the possibility of elevating the ceiling, you know, 6 or 8 inches, if that would improve the unit quality, then maybe be more selective in terms of where the ducts are going and think about them as a spatial defining element possibly in the ceiling plane in terms of softening down or dropping out.
This is actually, Dan, why I've suggested that some of them just model some of these units in 3 dimensions so that they start to think about the distribution of heating in them.
Let's see what else. You know, again, it is important for vertical alignment in some cases. So as trivial as it seems, to keep in mind things like plumbing lines and vent stacks, keeping them vertically aligned is important to think about as well. I know I did ask you to identify HVAC zones. I would say every unit's going to be its own zone for all intents and purposes. So on a typical apartment floor, you only have the common areas, which are probably going to be your exercise room or your laundry. That's going to be a zone in your hallway, and that's about it. The most amount of zones you might have might be that lowest level, where you've got retail tenants and common spaces. That would be an area you'd want to think about zoning. Again, we talked a little bit about ventilation in the parking level. A number of you, I'm not really seeing how you would either mechanically or naturally ventilate it. So some areas to think about, doors in the garage do not have to be solid. They can be screens, heavy-duty metal gauge screens, so that can allow ventilation. You can introduce openings in the parking level deck where you have the sort of the plaza space in your building. That could be a way for natural ventilation, and you might want to think about those jet fans. That was one of the options information I sent you a while back about ventilating a.
I think John and Stefan have those sort of cores through the horizontal roof of the garage that ends up treating it as a kind of a ventilation and daylighting solution.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
In terms of building envelope, I think we've got some work to do there. I'm only seeing we have a couple of teams starting to show me enlarged elevations. So start moving into developing the enlarged elevations and wall sections. And please, you do need to read those online references I've given you regarding the building envelope. So pay attention to reducing thermal bridging problems. Pay attention to targeting certain R values, making sure that I would say at a minimum, you know what the 189.1 standard is for your R value. That was Andrew's report at the beginning of the term. Your walls, your roof, those elements should be meeting that standard. And also think about your U values for your glass or your glazing as well. And take a look at properties like solar heat gain reflection coefficients for glass, paying attention to that, particularly on the west or the south facing sides of the building. Let's see. I would say, at this point, most of you are at the point where I think you're working more on HVAC, so I expect to see more discussion there as we're moving forward. And I think the other area will be to see more discussion on your building sections and wall sections and development of those section drawings as well. That's where I pretty much see things going. Now, again, in sustainability, we have a lead report that was done at the very beginning by Cody, told you how you can begin to earn lead credits. We have some sustainable material references, for example. I think for the most part, there could be some effort moving there as you go forward. I think it would be worth putting effort there. And then, of course, in terms of the energy modeling, we've got Dustin coming up, so hopefully we'll be able to see how well your projects will perform on the energy modeling side. And please be careful that, with Dustin, you understand what some of the options are available in that software and not just sort of read something and not really quite interpret it. I think you need to make sure you understand what some of the functions in the output is within the software. I do have some links that Dustin sent last time.
Right.
Before you come to the April 5th. And what I'll do is I'll forward you those links. So if you want to read up a little bit about the software ahead of time, you can do that. Is anybody do we have anyone in this class who's taking Dustin's class this semester?
I am.
Okay, so we've got, is that Cody?
That's Casey.
Casey. So you already kind of know this, what this is about, correct?
Is it Format and Insight?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's good. It's helpful. I know last time I taught this class, I had a couple of students that had Dustin's class, and it made it a lot easier to kind of get through it, and that was good as well. For some of you that might be interested in entering your project in a competition, there is a competition coming up next year. It's the AIA Code Award. And what I'll suggest to Professor Farlow, the way that maybe you could present your or compile your 4 final boards for the end of the semester in a way that would allow you to do that, to just use that to enter that competition if you're interested in doing so. If you're a person who has a strong attachment and interest in the sustainability aspects of your project, that would be the type of competition you'd like to take into consideration, because that's going to be the focus in the competition. And it's not difficult. Basically, it's a digital submission. There's no mailing, no printing. All I need to know is by December of this coming year, November of this coming year, of this year rather, that you want to enter, and then I'll register you, and then you just send your material on as an email attachment, and you're done. It only takes a minute. But we can talk more about that later. I know there's probably at least 2 or 3 of you teams that seem to be interested in the sustainability, so that's good. I will have another lecture sent out to you about wall sections and envelopes that I prepared, but I'm not sure exactly ready for that yet. I'll give you a little breather before we get that out. I know Professor Farlow talked about a period where maybe he was going to let you have time to work on the project, but not necessarily hold class sessions. Is that correct?
Yes.
What was that time frame?
That's the last week of classes before the reviews. So the reviews are April 24 and 26. So I only hold class by appointment only on the 17th and the 19th. That's
Okay.
crunch week.
Okay. I would probably also be in a situation where I'll really take your emails, I'll look your project over and give you feedback.
Right.
We can have an online session if you want to, but for the most part, I think at that point it'd be more about fielding individual questions and individual review of issues that you've got coming up. I would say basically what you have in Lab Module 3 pretty much is the extent of what one would expect by the end of the semester, other than the possibility of moving into some energy modeling, maybe doing some LCA analysis type work as well. I can give you links to a couple pieces of software if you want to go in that direction. Has anyone done daylight studies in Revit? Anyone done a daylight model in Revit or used the daylight function in Revit?
I've tinkered around with it.
Okay.
There's like a little add-on there.
From
Right?
what I hear, it's not hard to use, but I've heard some students say that when they went in to try to use that functionality, they were having some problems with their just gaining access to it, and I'm not sure exactly why. But from those people I did know who did use it, they said it wasn't very difficult to use, and it can tell you it can tell you how close you are to earning LEED credits, for example, with regard to the percentage of spaces that have adequate daylighting. So you might want to think about that. It could be an easy software application and tell you something useful about your daylighting performance.
Is that the light analysis download from the Insight that you forwarded a couple days ago?
I'm not sure if it is or not. I think it is though.
Because yeah, it's got several options and it has like a purchasing requirement, but as long as you register as a student, it won't charge you.
Yeah, as I said, for some reason we had a little bit of glitches last year. Casey's texting that he said he used it in Dustin's class. Is that right?
Yep.
And how was it? Relatively straightforward?
I think it was one of the easier assignments. So yeah.
Okay. So I would think about that. I think that could be a quick way to gain insight, data, information about your potential for daylighting criteria and LEED credits without much difficulty. So I did have a chance to talk to Jason as well. So I had some feedback from him about how the review session went as well. So
good. He shared the grade sheets and comments with me today, and I returned them, Dan,
Okay.
to the 3 groups that he visited with.
Okay. Are there any outstanding issues with handicapped accessibility and ADA, or is everyone pretty well okay with that at this point?
No one has said anything. Guys, do you have any questions or concerns on that theme?
If you do, let me know. I have a couple of links I can forward to you about designing kitchens and bathrooms for seniors and the elderly and accessibility. And then I have another link on the general requirements for multifamily housing and ADA, particularly with seniors. So if you're interested in that, if you think you need something, let me know. I can forward that to you. It's a quick online course on the topic, and you can just gain access to it.
I wouldn't mind if you sent the general requirements for the ADA for just to review them again.
Okay, that's fine. I'll try to get to that after this session today. I'll pop that over in your email.
Thank you.
Are there any more scheduled sort of online reviews that we're going to be having over the next few weeks?
No.
Okay.
No, the next one, Dan, is the last review, Benchmark 3, in the last week of April.
So that's your final presentation.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's jury week, and that's when the college wants us to have our reviews on the 2 nights that we have our regularly scheduled class.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, I mean, I'd like you to take a look at the material that I sent you already, things about HVAC, et cetera. And then if you've got questions for Thursday, we can take a look at those. I'm thinking Monday of next week would be, I could be sending out information about wall section development and enlarged elevations and wall section coordination for those that would want to start on that if you're thinking about getting started further on that at that point. So that would be about it for me.
Outstanding. Anyone have any questions for Professor Farrow?
On Module 3, both Jess and I are graduate students, so there's the additional assignment.
That's correct.
Do we each need to come up with a separate?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
Because you're each graduate students, the answer would be yes.
Okay,
I mean,
but we'll have one Module 3 with 2 of those.
That's correct, but I think it's all about your project, right?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, it feeds itself into the project to your advantage would be my argument. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Nora, you're the other graduate student, correct?
Nora is the other one.
Yeah,
right.
So it's the same thing for you.
Right.
Yes. And I also had some questions on some of that stuff, but I can reach out to Dan.
We can do it as an email exchange if you want to do it that way.
Okay.
Unless you think Jess or Nate would benefit from it. It's up to you.
Well, I downloaded some of the software that was there, and I've been troubleshooting it and doing it, but it's still very some of the information is just, to me, it's still very confusing. So it was more of a. So I'll just keep playing with the software, and if I have any.
I would say that the LCA software that we've previewed before has not really been a big problem.
The Athena one.
Like the LCA software, like Athena or Tally.
Okay.
Although you might need to get a special download for Tally, for Revit.
Okay.
Therm, the wall section modeling software that's used to test out thermal bridging. Again, that one I've not had any complaints with from students over the few years that we've used that as well. It seems fairly straightforward. And I know those at least 2 of those softwares I know are being used in firms. Tally's used in firms and Therm is used in firms in this area. So.
Okay.
So I think it's an application to a professional skill set that you would find useful later, would be my point.
Right.
So you're on your way with a lot of challenges. I know it's tough at the end of the semester, but remember, Professor Farlow sets a high bar. He wants to see that kind of accomplishment that suggests that this is the culmination of what's happened with you in the last 4 years. You're going to stand in front of a jury and make a case for why you should be advancing yourself to proceed in the field of architecture, and how well you prepared to do that, and convincing your jurors that you are prepared to do that. So I think that's the task you've got ahead of you. Let it be the opportunity to develop what you would hopefully find to be a strong, or one of the best, if not the best portfolio example of work that you have. You know, it's going to open doors for you in firms if you can really make a strong case for your competency and for the quality of your work for this project. I think both Professor Farlow and I see it as somewhat of a capstone type experience in that regard.
Yeah, this is great that you're saying this.
So I want to reiterate that. It is competitive out there, and I'm not going to tell you who I had this conversation with, but I had a conversation with, one of the adjuncts, who's actually been through this institution, and he says, we see a lot of resumes, we see a lot of portfolios. It's getting tougher and tougher every year. People are coming out of school with, more competitive types of portfolio documentation, and he said, you really have to work hard to set the bar high for how well you're preparing yourself, because there's a lot of higher quality work that's coming out. And he said, on the positive side, firms do need people, and
everybody's busy.
Right, they're looking, and unfortunately, because of the severe economic downturns from 08 and 09. There are a number of people who kind of retired out of architecture or decided not to go back into architecture for a period. So there's a vacuum there in talent and ability. And so a lot of firms are looking. So I think now's the opportunity to, try to have that work sample in your portfolio that will, demonstrate for you the possibility of opening doors. I think that would be my best encouragement to offer right now. And we certainly want to help you do that.
Yep, outstanding.
So unless there's any other questions for today, I can just field them as email exchange. I know I've had a number of emails with you. Sometimes I've done Hangout exchanges with people. That works fine. So we can do that anytime you might need some additional input on what aspects of the project you'd like to get responses to or answers to. So,
anyone else?
If not, that's it for me.
Me too. Thank you, Dan.
All right, thank you.
Good to see you. Have a great night.
All right, you too. And see you guys on Thursday.
On Thursday. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.